Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today we're venturing deep into the heart of Texas, where the ghost towns are more than just forgotten places. They're graveyards of secrets. From crumbling churches that breathe in the night to towns where the dead still walk dirt roads under a red sky. Get ready for 25 Texas ghost towns with dark histories that will chill you to the bone. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now. Because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror buried in these towns is far from over. So, where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments. Because here, the night is only getting started, and the horror is ready to unfold. Now, let's dive into the darkness. The first thing you notice about Thurber is the silence. Not the good kind of silence, like the hush before a baby falls asleep, or the quiet peace after a snowfall. No. Thurber's silence is tight, itchy, and wrong. It sticks to your skin like soot, settles in your throat like smoke that hasn't fully cleared. I went there because of a story. Not the kind that starts in a newspaper, but the kind that comes to you whispered by a man, 2 beers too deep at a shitty bar off I-20. He leaned in, breath like stale corn chips, and said, "You ever heard of the town that burned itself alive?" Laughed. He didn't. Just stared at me with glassy eyes and added, "Go to Thurber, you'll see what I mean, but don't go after sunset. It wakes up after dark." I should have left it alone. But I've always had a soft spot for ghost towns. There's something magnetic about places people abandoned. Like they didn't just leave, they fled. Thurber was one of those places, once the biggest coal mining town in Texas back in the late 1800s. A company town, built by Texas and Pacific Coal Company. All neat red brick buildings, smokestacks, and pickaxes in the earth. It had churches, saloons, a theater, even its own ice plant. Then oil came and the coal dried up. The town emptied out by the mid-1930s, and Thurber died a slow, wheezing death. At least that's the official story. But if you go there, if you're dumb enough to follow the sound of whispers buried in coal dust, you find out it didn't die. Not really. Something stayed. I got there around 4 in the afternoon. The sky was overcast, the way it gets when a storm is thinking about rolling in but hasn't quite committed. The old smokestack still stands, tall and cracked, looming over the town like a finger pointing at something nobody wants to see. There are remnants everywhere. Brick ruins, rusted mining carts, foundations half swallowed by weeds. I walked through what used to be the main road. You could almost see the outlines of what was the general store, the boarding houses, a church missing its steeple, and everywhere, soot. The ground was black with it, not just dirt, not ash, soot. I crouched down and ran a finger through it. It smeared like grease and smelled faintly of burnt meat. The bar guy's words came back to me. "Don't go after sunset." I didn't listen. Of course I didn't. Because I don't believe in ghost stories until they bite. I had brought my camera, took a few shots of the collapsing houses, then sat on the hood of my car, waiting. Maybe for nothing. Maybe for something. Sunset in Thurber isn't golden, it's red. Deep, bloody red that stretches across the sky like torn skin. The wind picked up and I could swear I heard a sound in it. A crackle, faint and familiar. Not leaves, not trees. Fire. I stood up fast, heart hammering. The buildings were still just ruins. No flames. But the air had changed. It was warmer. Too warm for spring, too warm for anywhere without fire. And then I saw the footprints, not mine. I wear boots. These were bare human feet, small, narrow like a child's. Imprinted in soot, they trailed down what used to be a side street. And they were fresh, still forming in front of me, as if something unseen had just passed by. My breath hitched. Every instinct screamed to get in the car and drive, but I followed. The prints led me to what used to be the entrance of the mine. It was sealed, of course, bricked up. A rusted sign still hung there. Danger. Mine closed since 1933. But the E, soot around the entrance pulsed, like a heartbeat. And then I heard the laughter, a child's giggle, but wrong, echoing, distant, and sharp. It sounded like it came from the bottom of a long, long tunnel. The bricked-up wall was hot to the touch. I burned my palm before I realized. I'd even reached for it. Then I heard a whisper, "Come back, come back, come back." I turned around and the town was on fire, but not flames in the normal sense. There was no smoke, no crackle, just buildings outlined in red-orange glow flickering, like the fire was there and not there all at once, like the town was remembering itself burning. And in that glow, I saw them, figures blurry and half-formed, walking through the ruined streets. Men in mining caps, women in long dresses, soot on their faces, children holding hands, skin charred and eyes empty. They didn't walk, they moved, gliding almost. Their mouths opened and closed, but the sound came out wrong, like wind through broken glass. They all moved toward the mine, all except one. A girl, maybe 9 or 10, stood at the edge of the street. Hair burnt to the scalp on one side, skin peeling, and she was smiling at me. "You came back," she said. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She reached out her hand, and in that moment, I felt heat rise under my feet. The ground began to glow. Soot turned to ember. My car was gone. The whole road behind me, gone. "You came back," she said again, but this time her mouth didn't move. The voice was in my head, loud, echoing, filling every corner of my brain. I ran. I don't know how I got out. Don't remember the drive. Just remember waking up in a ditch on the side of the highway, my car parked behind me, engine cold. My shoes were melted at the soles. That was 6 weeks ago. Every night since, I've heard that voice when I close my eyes. "You came back. You came back. You came back." And when I dream, God help me, I dream of fire. Not flames. Fire that thinks. Fire that remembers. Fire that waits. So if you're reading this and you ever find yourself heading west on I-20 and see the sign for Thurber, Texas, keep driving, even if you're curious. Especially if you're curious, because some towns don't die, they just burn, forever. And sometimes, they remember you. Indianola was never meant to be a ghost town. It was meant to be the shining port of Texas, a bustling harbor of salt-stained piers, thick with German immigrants and the stench of fish, tar, and dreams. But the sea had other plans. The first hurricane came in 1875, dragging in walls of water taller than the steeple of St. Matthew's, and winds that peeled roofs like tin can lids. It gutted the town, turned proud homes into driftwood, and took the names of 100 souls into the black surf. Survivors rebuilt. Texans always rebuilt. But the sea wasn't done. 11 years later, it came again, angrier this time, like a drunk father who didn't like to be ignored. The 1886 storm didn't just flatten Indianola, it erased it, left nothing but mud, bones, and the echo of screams that never quite went quiet. The government said no more, no rebuilding, let it drown. And for over a century it stayed that way, quiet, sunken, forgotten. But there's a thing about forgetting. It doesn't sit right with the dead. The sea along the Matagorda Bay shoreline has always had a strange temperament, more moods than a tired waitress at the end of a double shift. Some days it's glassy calm, like a sleeping child. Others, it seethes. Locals in Port Lavaca, especially the old-timers who spit chaw into coffee cans and wear caps from the Vietnam War, talk about how the tide goes out too far some nights, farther than it should, and how sometimes you can hear it. The voices. Sheriff Dale Haskins was one of the few who ever saw the ghost lights himself. He'd been drinking, well, more than drinking really, after his daughter ran off to Houston and didn't come back. Said she was going to be a model. Turns out she modeled for a needle and a toe tag. That kind of pain stays with a man. It was September 12, 1995, the tail end of hurricane season, when Dale was out near Indianola's ruins, watching the moon throw silver on the water. He saw them, faint glows rising from where the old town would have been, like lanterns held underwater. Then the sound came, screaming, not the wind, not gulls, human screaming, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. He thought it was a hallucination, until the next week, when a shrimping boat capsized not far from that same spot. 5 men went overboard. Only one made it back, and he never spoke again, just rocked in his hospital bed, clawing at the air like something was dragging him down. By 2003, rumors started bubbling up again. There was talk of a third storm, one that had been cooking for decades. Some meteorologists said there was no science to back the patterns up, but Gulf Coast folks, especially the kind that nail horseshoes to their doors and still sleep with a Bible under their pillow, said otherwise. They said Indianola wasn't just lost, it was waiting. In 2008, when Hurricane Ike was about to make landfall, a fisherman named Arturo Gutierrez anchored his boat near what used to be 6th Street, the very heart of drowned Indianola. His family begged him not to. They'd seen signs, fish washing up with eyes missing, birds flying inland too early, and a foul stench coming from the tide even on sunny days. He went anyway. They found his boat 2 days after the storm passed, tangled in marsh grass. No Arturo. Just the soaked deck, blood on the rails, and a strange black mud smearing every inch of the hull. Mud that stank like old rot and ocean graves. A diver with the Coast Guard said he'd gone down under the wreck to look for Arturo's body. The water was murky, full of silt and weeds. But he swore. He saw something below, peering up through the sand. Not a body, not bones. A face, pale and bloated, with empty eyes and a mouth open in an endless scream. Then the voices started, again. Tourists who camp near the Indianola fishing marina talk about children's laughter on nights when there are no kids around. Grown men shout in their sleep, waking with sand in their mouths. One man said he saw a woman walking into the sea in the dead of night, wearing a bonnet and dress soaked through, her feet never touching the water as she moved deeper and deeper, into the black tide. She never came back. There were no footprints. Just a dead pelican lying on the beach, its eyes torn out. The local historical society tried to make Indianola a tourist spot. Put up signs, maps, even sold postcards. The signs rusted. The maps bled ink in the rain. And every damn time they put a new stack of postcards on the rack, one would vanish. Just one. Like someone or something was collecting them. Now they say the third storm is almost here. Not the kind that shows up on Doppler radar, no. The kind that slinks in under your skin, brings a chill even in July. One that smells like wet wood and burnt candles. There have been tremors, little ones beneath the sea floor. The crabs are leaving, the gulls are screaming. And at night, the beach near Indianola is full of footprints that don't match any living soul. They say the town is coming back. But not the buildings, not the living. They say when the third storm hits, it'll raise more than just water. It'll raise the drowned, and this time they won't go quietly. So if you ever drive down Highway 316 and you see the moon high and the tide low, don't stop. Don't listen. And whatever you do, don't answer the voices calling your name. From the bay, because Indianola drowned twice, and the third time, it's coming for you. Barstow, Texas sits low and crooked on the edge of nowhere, where the sky feels too big and the dirt too dry. It's one of those places that didn't so much die as it did forget how to live. Used to be a real town, back when the Pecos River flowed strong and the irrigation ditches ran cool and clear through fields of cotton. That was back in the early 1900s, before the river dried up, the crops withered, and the heat set in like a curse. Now it's nothing but dust and silence and a smell like scorched earth after rain. I came to Barstow because I was chasing a ghost story. Not the kind that jumps out at you in a mirror, no. This was stranger, older, the kind of tale that clings to a place like a stain that won't wash out. I'd heard about the children, the ones that still played by the well, The well at the center of town looks like nothing special. A ring of ancient stone in the middle of a dried-up plaza, warped and cracked by 100 summers. There's no sign, no fence, no plaque. Just a deep black hole in the ground. Locals, what few are left, don't talk about it. If you ask, they look away. Some cross themselves. One old man spat on the ground and said, "They never grew up, they just stopped." The story goes like this. In 1931, a terrible drought hit Barstow. The Pecos turned to mud. The crops failed. People packed up and left. But a few families stayed, too stubborn or too poor to run. Among them were the children. 11 of them, between 5 and 13. Every night, they gathered at the well to play. Their laughter echoed through the streets, bright and sharp like chimes, but then the water stopped. The last time anyone drew from the well, the bucket came up dry and smelling of something sour and metallic. After that, the children changed. They didn't get sick, didn't die. They just stopped aging. It was subtle, at first. Nobody noticed for weeks, then months, then years. And when it became obvious that the kids weren't growing, weren't changing at all, parents panicked. A few tried to flee with them. Didn't work. The cars stalled outside town. The buses broke down. One family tried to walk the children out on foot, but only the adults made it to Pecos, babbling nonsense and bleeding from the eyes. The children returned to the well the next night, barefoot and smiling. It's said that after a while, the adults just gave up. Some went mad. Others disappeared. One woman hung herself in the church basement. One man burned down his house, with himself inside. By the 1950s, Barstow was a ghost town, mostly empty. But at night, if you came close enough to the well, you could still hear them. That's why I came. Not to find the children, though I'll admit that part thrilled me, but to find out if the story was real. I'd been collecting strange tales for a long time, enough to know that most are just stories. But sometimes, they're warnings. I arrived at Barstow just before dusk. The sun was bleeding out on the horizon, painting everything in gold and rust. The town looked hollow. Empty houses with dead-eyed windows. A school with broken steps and weeds growing up through the flagpole base. No wind, no birds. I parked near the church and walked the rest of the way. My boots crunched on gravel. Every step echoed too loud. The well was exactly where I'd been told it would be, in the center of what must have once been a town square. The stone rim was old but intact, the rope and bucket long gone. I knelt beside it, peered down. It was black, not the kind of black that comes from shadows, but the kind that looks like it's swallowing light. I couldn't see the bottom, I couldn't hear anything. Not yet. I stayed. I waited. Midnight came slow, like a held breath. The moon hung high and sickly, and the air was too still. My skin itched with it, the kind of itch that comes before something happens. And then, I heard it, a giggle, light and high and right behind me. I spun around, heart in my throat, but the square was empty. Then came the second sound, a small ball bouncing. It hit stone. Tock, tock, tock. From the left I saw movement, just a blur, white, soft and low to the ground. Then another laugh. They came out of the shadows slowly, like smoke curling out of an old pipe. 11 children, just like the story said. Their clothes were faded, old-fashioned, suspenders, bonnets, dirty lace. But their faces, oh God, their faces, they were perfect, smooth, untouched, not a freckle out of place, frozen in time like porcelain dolls. Eyes too wide, smiles too still. One girl skipped toward me. She couldn't have been more than 7, with dark curls and a red ribbon tied in her hair. The ribbon looked brand new, her dress didn't. The hem was torn and something dark stained the front. She tilted her head. "Are you lost?" she asked. Her voice was musical, innocent, but the space between her words felt stretched, like silence was trying to swallow them. "No," I said. "I came to see you." She blinked. "We don't get visitors." "Why not?" She smiled wider. because they never leave. The others gathered around the well, forming a circle. One boy, tall and freckled, maybe 12, began to hum a song. Something old. It made my ears hurt. Another child, a girl with no shoes and one missing eye, whispered something into the hole. The ground trembled. I took a step back. My instincts were screaming now, run, 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 but I didn't run, because I saw something in the well, not just darkness, movement, shapes, eyes, too many. Looking back. "We can show you," the ribbon girl said. "If you want." She held out her hand. I wanted to take it, I really did. But then I noticed something. The air around them shimmered, like heat waves on asphalt. And there was no wind, no sound from the town at all, except them. Time, I realized, wasn't just slowed here, it was stopped. I looked at my watch. Midnight. It didn't move. The second hand was stuck. I backed away. One step, two. They started toward me then. Not running, not lunging, just walking, calm, smiling. "Stay," they whispered in unison. "Play with us." I turned and ran. The square stretched behind me like a rubber band. Every footstep felt heavy, like running through molasses, but I made it to the car, slammed the door, turned the key. The engine coughed, then started. As I drove, the town faded behind me, and the air felt lighter. My watch ticked again. I don't know what that well is. I don't want to. But I know this. Much time doesn't move in Barstow. Not around that well. Not for those children, they are still there, still waiting. And if you go, if you stay past midnight, they'll ask you to play. And if you do, you'll never grow old. Because you'll never grow again at all. Toya, Texas is the kind of place even the dust seems to have forgotten. Nothing but flatland for miles. The kind that makes your eyes water from squinting too long, and your soul itch like it knows it shouldn't be there. The wind never stops. It screams down from the mountains in the west and blows through that town like it's looking for something. Or someone. There used to be a schoolhouse. Whitewashed wood, red trim, a bell tower that leaned just a little to the left like it was tired of listening to children. It sat at the far end of town near a cotton field that hadn't grown cotton since the 70s. The kind of building that made you think of simpler times. You know the type. American flag in the corner, rows of desks with kids carving initials into them. And that damn bell. They say you could hear it 3 towns over when the wind was right. It burned down on a Tuesday in 1961. Nobody ever figured out how the fire started. Some said lightning. Others whispered about a janitor who drank too much and fell asleep with a cigarette. But the real ones, the old-timers who lived through it, they won't say a word about it. Just get this look in their eyes like someone's walking over their grave with a matchbox in hand. They say all 27 kids and 1 teacher made it out. That's what the records say anyway. But there's this picture, faded and grainy, still hanging in the town hall. Class of 61. Look close enough, past the forced smiles and pressed collars, and there's a boy in the back row. Pale, thin, eyes like 2 drops of oil on a white plate. Nobody ever could name him. Some say he wasn't real. Just a shadow on the film. A trick of the light, and yet, after the fire, people started hearing things. First it was the bell, ringing in the dead of night, even though the tower was nothing but a scorched stump and the bell itself had melted into a warped chunk of bronze. Then came the voices, children laughing, not happy laughter, mocking, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your gut twist like they're laughing at you, like they know something you don't. Sheriff Jerry Ellis heard it once, back in '73 when he was just a deputy and still had most of his hair. He'd been out driving the old patrol car down Highway 20, radio crackling with static. Midnight. No moon. The kind of darkness that presses on your eyeballs. He stopped near the old school ruins to take a leak, and that's when he heard the bell, clear as a sunrise. Ding, 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 said it felt like it was ringing in his chest, not his ears. He turned, flashlight in hand, and for a moment, he swore he saw children standing in the charred frame of the schoolhouse, not moving, just watching. He quit 6 months later, bought a trailer in Galveston and started painting sea turtles. Then there was the Martin family. In 1984, they moved into a prefab house not far from the ruins. Cheap land, big sky. The father, Harold, worked at the gas plant. Good guy, churchgoer, didn't believe in ghosts or superstitions. Until the bell rang, every night at 12:13. 3 chimes, then the sound of running footsteps. Small ones, sometimes a giggle, other times a scream, the kind of scream that stops your heart mid-beat and makes you check your kid's bed 4 times just to be sure. Their daughter, Lily, started sleepwalking. They'd find her in the backyard facing the ruins, eyes wide open, lips moving. Her mother swore she was speaking Latin. They weren't even Catholic, just Methodist and scared out of their goddamn minds. They left after 6 weeks. House sat empty for years until the roof caved in. No one tried to fix it. No one dared. They say the ashes of that school still whisper. If the wind dies down just enough and you hold your breath real quiet, you can hear it. Words, names, begging, screaming. A bell that rings for the dead. No one's seen the boy from the photo since, but some claim if you light a fire near the ruins on a Tuesday night, you'll see him in the smoke, smiling, waiting, and every so often, once a year or so, a passerby stops in Toya, maybe to piss, maybe to get gas, maybe just because the road's long and the desert's endless. And if they're unlucky enough to stop after midnight, they might hear that bell, might even see the shape of the school rise in the moonlight, whole again for just a second. Lights in the windows, laughter. But don't go closer. Don't look too hard, because if you do, you'll see the children staring back. And the boy with oil drop eyes ringing that bell with hands that never burned, never aged. And once you hear it, really hear it, you're marked. You'll dream of smoke. You'll smell burnt books and singed hair even when you're miles away. And one night, maybe years later, when you've finally forgotten about Toya, the bell will ring again just for you. There's something about West Texas that feels haunted even without the ghosts. You drive long enough through the desert, and your brain starts to do funny things. Sands shimmer like water, shadows twitch where there's nothing to cast them, and you start hearing sounds through the radio even when it's turned off. Terlingua is a place that leans into all that weirdness. A sun-bleached graveyard of dreams, too far from anything that matters, too close to something that should have stayed buried. They used to pull mercury out of the ground there. Quicksilver, they called it. Back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was a boomtown, full of hard men and broken backs. There were saloons and bunkhouses and a cemetery that just kept growing. Nobody asked how long you planned to stay in Terlingua. They just waited to see if you made it past the first season without coughing up blood. See, mercury don't just poison your body, it messes with your head. The miners knew it. You could see it in their eyes after a few years underground, the way they'd twitch, mutter to themselves, forget where they were. They'd scratch at their skin until it bled. Then came the shaking, the rage, then the silence. They say the worst part wasn't dying. It was knowing you were still down there, still deep in those tunnels, long after your body gave out. I never planned to go to Terlingua. I ended up there because I was tired, low on gas, and needed a place to crash that didn't smell like mildew or trucker sweat. I'd been following a story about haunted mines across the Southwest, gathering material for a book nobody would read, just another washed-up writer chasing shadows. The place I found was an old casita on the edge of what's now called the Ghost Town. It had no AC, but the bones of the house were thick adobe, so it stayed cool at night. There was a single fan, a warped bed, and a window that looked out toward the hills where the mines used to breathe. The owner was a leathery woman named Jeanette, with one glass eye and a rattlesnake tattoo that ran the length of her arm. "Don't go near the mines after dark," she told me. "You'll hear things. They ain't for you." I asked her what she meant. "You ever heard a dead man try to breathe?" she said, then smiled without showing her teeth. I should have left it alone. But the story, It pulls at you, especially in a place like Terlingua, where even the stars seem like they're watching you. That night, around 11, I took a flashlight and a bottle of warm beer and went walking toward the hills. The entrance to the old Chisos mine was still there, sealed with a rusted iron grate and marked with a "Keep Out" sign that hadn't worked on anyone since 1972. I sat near the entrance and waited. At first there was nothing, just the wind shifting sand and the low hum of cicadas. Then somewhere around midnight I heard it. A cough. Dry. Ragged. Human. I froze. The sound came again, followed by another, like someone choking on dust deep in the tunnel. I stood, stepped closer to the grate, and shone my flashlight through. Nothing but darkness. But then I felt it, cold air, rising up from the sealed mine. It shouldn't have been possible. The place had been sealed for decades. But the breeze was real, and it smelled of rust, sweat, and something sharp, like chemicals or bile. I heard the cough again, and then voices, not loud, not clear, just whispers layered over each other, like dozens of men all mumbling at once in a language that wasn't quite English. I thought maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me. I even laughed just a little until something moved in the shadows. It wasn't a person. I don't know how to explain it. It was a shape, a shimmer, like heat rising off blacktop, but wrong. It hovered just behind the grate, and when I shone the light toward it, I saw eyes, not glowing, just watching, flat and dull like something that hadn't seen the sun in 100 years. And then I heard the pickaxes. They weren't real, I mean, they couldn't have been. But I swear to God, I heard that metallic thunk of metal on rock, rhythmic and steady, echoing up from the earth like the mine was still alive. My flashlight flickered. Something touched my ankle. I dropped the bottle and ran. Didn't look back. Didn't breathe until I slammed the casita door behind me and locked it twice. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Jeanette made me coffee and didn't ask any questions. She just poured a splash of whiskey in her own mug and stared out the window toward the hills. "They don't want company," she said. I left Terlingua before noon. I drove fast, too fast, all the way to Alpine without stopping. That was a year ago. Since then, every so often, I hear that cough again. Always around midnight. Doesn't matter where I am. Doesn't matter if the windows are closed. I'll be lying in bed, and it'll just drift in. And I dream of tunnels, endless and winding, carved deep into the earth. There are men down there, miners. But they're not really men anymore. They've been breathing mercury for too long, and they're still digging, still coughing, still waiting for someone to come back down and join them. Belle Plain, Texas is a name most people haven't heard in 50 years. Not unless they're the type who dig through yellowed newspapers in county libraries or walk through graveyards reading the stones for fun. It's not even a town anymore. Just a cracked marker off FM 1926, a weed-choked cemetery, and the bones of a college that was supposed to turn the West into something refined, enlightened. Belle Plain College opened in 1881 with 20 students, one chapel, and the kind of ambition you could smell on the wind. They built it up on a rise just east of the clear fork of the Brazos River. Stone walls, iron gates, and stained glass that caught the morning light like blood caught in a mason jar. It was Methodist run, strict as hell, and proud. Real proud. They had professors from back east, the kind with spectacles and Latin degrees. They said Belle Plain would raise up good Christian boys and girls, turn cattle country into Harvard on the prairie. It lasted 11 years. They don't talk about why it shut down. Not really. The papers blamed the railroad, said it bypassed the town and killed it slow like a tumor. But that's not what the stories say. And there are stories. They say it started with the digging. See, the chapel had a cellar. More of a crypt, really. Sealed behind an iron door with no key. Old design, left over from the Civil War days when that hill held a Confederate field hospital. The students used to dare each other to go down there, most didn't. The air was wrong. Too cold, too thick. The janitor, old Joe Parsons, said the mortar sweated in the dark, and that sometimes, just sometimes, he'd hear knocking down there when the wind was still. Then one spring, a theology professor named Lucian Graves decided the cellar should be cleared out and cataloged, said it was good for historical integrity, and that the truth always brings light. They let him open it, gave him 2 students, both boys, smart ones. Names are long gone, but one had a limp from a plowing accident and the other wore round glasses so thick they looked like bottle bottoms. They went down on a Monday morning. Only one came back, and he didn't come back right. They found him curled, up behind the altar, nails torn off, eyes white as frost, whispering, "It's not buried. It's waiting." The other boy, glasses, was never found. Not even bones, not even blood. Professor Graves wouldn't speak, not at first. Then, 2 days later, he hanged himself from the bell rope. The bell rang 13 times that night, long after the body had been cut down. After that, students started leaving. Some ran, others disappeared. One girl slit her wrists and wrote something on the wall in her own blood, something the sheriff made them paint over before the bishop could arrive. All anyone remembered were the last 2 words, "below us." And the ground changed too. Things grew wrong. Grass wilted in circles around the chapel. Cattle wouldn't go near it. One night the headmaster's dog came home skinned and smiling, its lips stretched back by nails, eyes still blinking. That's when the last group of parents pulled their children out and the place was abandoned. By 1900, Belle Plain was a ruin. The windows shattered, the chapel black with mildew, and the cellar door rusted shut again, this time with chains welded across it. But even now, people say it still opens sometimes. The bell hasn't rung in over a century. But if you stand at the edge of where the chapel used to be just after midnight, you might hear it. Far off, dull, like it's ringing from under the ground. Some say the cellar wasn't a crypt. It was a seal. Something under the chapel, something buried before even the hospital was built. Something old, something hungry. Maybe it fed on blood, maybe on fear. But whatever it was, Belle Plain's thirst never stopped. There've been disappearances, kids from Abilene or Weatherford who go ghost hunting and don't come back. A couple in 1982 who parked near the ruins to neck and were found days later, dried out like jerky, mouths open in a scream they couldn't finish. No tracks around the car, no sign of anyone else. And the weirdest part? The bodies looked fresh, like they'd only died minutes before. The coroner quit his job the same week and started drinking mouthwash to sleep. They tried to bulldoze the Chapel Foundation once in 2005. Local contractor, big guy name was Randy Miller. Machines wouldn't start. One backhoe flipped over without being touched. The driver broke his back and claimed, while they were loading him into the ambulance, that something laughed at him from inside the old cellar. Randy still won't talk about what he saw when they pried open the ground. But he sold the company a week later and left the state. Montana, I think. Or maybe Alaska, somewhere with no cellars. Belle Plain is still out there. Not even on most maps. Just a gravel path through dead mesquite trees, circling back around itself like a noose. The stone sign by the entrance reads, "To enlighten," in Latin, but the rest is too worn to read. And they say that sometimes when the air's heavy and still, you can see students walking the grounds. Not ghosts exactly, shadows in old-timey uniforms, heads bowed, books clutched to their chests, following each other in a line, like they're heading to class, or maybe they're still trapped there, feeding it, because Belle Plain didn't close. Not really. It just went underground. It starts with a turnoff. A stretch of desert highway between Van Horn and nothing where the sun sits low in the sky like it's stuck there, bleeding red across the horizon. You blink, and there it is, Lobo, Texas. Just a name on a cracked sign half buried in sand, letters peeling like old skin. You've never seen it on a map, and no one you ask remembers it either. But it feels familiar. That's the first warning. I wasn't planning to stop. I was just passing through, driving west with nothing but static on the radio and half a cup of coffee left in the thermos. I'd been running from something, don't ask what. It's the kind of thing that follows you even when you think you've outrun it. I saw the gas gauge dip just below a quarter and figured I'd pull off, refuel, maybe stretch my legs. Lobo looked like a place you could do that. The gas station was the first thing I saw. One pump. Old. The kind with the little spinning numbers and a hose that hung like a limp snake. The building beside it was pale and squat, its front windows dusty but not broken. A bell jingled overhead when I stepped inside. That too should have been a warning. Things in the desert don't stay that intact unless someone, or something, is looking after them. There was a man behind the counter. Thin, leathery smile that never quite touched his eyes. His name tag said Buddy in faded red letters. He greeted me like he'd been expecting me. "Long drive, huh?" he said. His voice was soft, like wind through dry grass. "Yeah," I said. "Didn't even know there was a town out here." He nodded, like he'd heard that before. Folks rarely do. "What are you headed for?" "California." He smiled again. "Not today, you're not." I should have laughed. Should have taken it for dry humor and gone on my way. But something about the way he said it, like it was carved in stone, made the hairs rise on my neck. I paid cash. The pump still worked. I filled up, used the bathroom in the back, cleaner than I expected, and got back in the car. The sun hadn't moved. Still low, still bleeding, still hanging like a painting pinned to the sky. I drove, past houses with empty porches, a diner with Lobo Cafe written in flaking red paint above the door, a high school long abandoned but intact, bleachers still standing. Everything looked paused, like someone had pressed the world's pause button in 1975 and then walked away. The highway curved left, just past the water tower, then opened up into the same desert it always had, until I saw the gas station again. Same pump, same squat building. Same sky. I thought I'd gotten turned around. Desert roads do that, mess with your sense of direction. I checked my phone. No signal. GPS, frozen. I turned around, drove back the way I came. The diner passed by again. The high school, the gas station, and then again and again. It took me until the fourth loop to start losing it. By the seventh, I screamed. It wasn't just the repetition. It was the details, the exactness of it. Every single time I passed the gas station, Buddy was behind the counter, watching, same tilt of the head, same unreadable expression. I stopped the car, got out, walked into the station again. The bell jingled. "Something wrong?" he asked. "What is this?" I snapped. "Why can't I leave?" He shrugged. "You drove in, didn't you?" "Yeah, and now I'm driving out." "People say that," he said. "At first." I leaned over the counter. "What the hell is this place?" He looked at me for a long time, then said, "Somewhere between where you came from and where you never quite made it. That's the best I can explain it." "Is this a dream?" "No," he said softly, "but it could be someone else's." I stumbled out, tried every direction, took dirt roads, paved ones, even drove off-road for a while. But every path, every single one, bent back around. The landmarks repeated like someone was loading the same page in a broken book. And the sun never moved. Never. I tried to sleep. In the car that night. Couldn't, too quiet, too still. And the weirdest part? I didn't get tired. My body stayed the same. No hunger, no thirst, not even the urge to piss. Time had stopped. I went back to the diner. It was open. I don't know how. A waitress served me coffee. Hot, black, bitter. She said her name was Dana and her eyes looked too old for her face. "You're new," she said. "Not by choice." She nodded like she understood too well. "We all drove in once. Is there a way out?" "There was," she said, "but he closed it." "Who?" She didn't answer. Just looked toward the hills beyond the high school, where the road curved into heat and dust. I stayed in Lobo for what felt like days. Weeks. Months. I don't know. The sun never budged. The gas station always had fuel. The people, what few there were, never changed. They just existed, repeated the same motions. You'd see the same man walking his dog every time you passed the post office, the same kid chasing a ball that never rolled far, a woman brushing her hair in the second-story window of a house with no furniture. Eventually, you stop asking questions. You just fall into the rhythm. It's easier than fighting it. You work at the station, sweep the porch, pour coffee at the diner, watch new drivers roll in, eyes wide, confused. You try not to warn them. It wouldn't help, because you drove, into and no one leaves Lobo. Not really, not ever. Glen Rio sits like a scar on the edge of Texas and New Mexico, a broken stretch of highway and hollowed-out buildings baking under the desert sun. It's not a town anymore, not really, just a ghost's idea of one. 2 gas stations, both long, dead. A crumbling motel where the curtains still sway though the windows are gone. An old diner with rusted bar stools and a cracked Formica counter that smells like burnt grease and mildew. But the strangest part is the line. A thin, fading stripe of paint down the middle of Route 66. One side says Texas, the other says New Mexico. People used to take pictures there back in the road trip days. Kids would jump back and forth across the border laughing, their parents snapping Polaroids. But those pictures are mostly gone now, tossed in boxes lost in floods or burned in house fires no one ever quite explained. Glen Rio died twice. Once when the interstate came through and sucked the life out of it like a wound in a vein. The second time was harder to explain. It started with the clocks. Every single one in town, those left behind in motels, gas stations, the post office, stopped at the same time. 3:33 a.m. No batteries, no power, no reason. But they all stopped, hands frozen in place like they were afraid to move forward. Then the animals left. First the dogs, then the cats. Birds stopped flying over. Coyotes howled but never came close. Even the snakes kept their distance, slithering wide arcs around the edge of town like they knew what was buried beneath the concrete and dust. People who visit say the air changes at night, thickens, smells like copper and something worse, wet leather, old teeth, burnt sugar. If you're there at the wrong hour, your phone dies. Your watch ticks backward. And if you're unlucky enough to be standing on the borderline, on that stripe of road where Texas ends and New Mexico begins, you might feel the ground hum under your feet. That's when you've got a problem. Because at exactly 3:33 a.m., something walks that line. Nobody knows what it is. Nobody who's seen it talks about it. The few who did survive, if they survived, don't speak much anymore. One guy, a trucker named Miles Rooker, made the mistake of pulling over there back in '91. He was running behind. Too much coffee, too many pills, and not enough sleep. He thought it would be fine to nap for an hour before hitting the road again. He woke up gasping, the truck shaking, windows fogged. Something was pressing on the glass. Not hitting, just pressing. Breathing, heavy, wet. He said he couldn't move. Sleep paralysis, he thought, until he looked in the rearview mirror and saw his own face staring back at him. But the eyes weren't his, they were black, like tunnels. He screamed and passed out. They found him wandering along the highway 15 hours later, barefoot, clothes soaked with blood that wasn't his. He never drove a rig again. Works at a bait shop now, mumbling about the line and the reflection that breathes. His wife says he talks to himself in his sleep, but he's not talking, he's arguing, begging. There's a local legend that the town was cursed long before it was a town. Native tribes avoided the area. They said the land there was thin, like the crust on top of cooling lava, that there were holes underneath where things lived. Not spirits, not gods. Things. Old things that wanted out. And that every so often, they got one night to walk the earth again. Just one. And that night is always at 3:33 a.m. The border stripe is more than paint. It's a seal, a threshold. One half of Glen Rio is in Texas. The other half isn't. Not, really, not anymore. A group of ghost hunters tried to stay overnight in the motel in 2017. They live-streamed it, set up cameras, EVP monitors, heat sensors. Around 3:30, everything went quiet. Not a flicker, not a sound. Just one frozen frame of footage. All four of them standing in the road, backs arched, mouths open like they were screaming, eyes wide and staring at something just off screen. Then static. They were never found. All that was left was a single shoe. And 4 phones with cracked screens still recording, still showing 3:33 a.m. Locals from Adrian and San John don't go near the place. Highway patrol won't even stop if you break down near Glen Rio. They'll radio it in, tell you to walk, wish you luck. Because the line doesn't care who you are or where you're from. It just wants you to step across it. They say that whatever walks it isn't looking for the dead. It's looking for the living, for warm skin, moving breath, soft things to wear like clothes. So if you're ever driving west on Route 66 and the sky turns red too early, and your dashboard clock blinks 3:33 for no good reason, do not stop. Don't look in the rear view. Don't open your window no matter how soft the knock sounds. And for the love of God, don't stand on the line, because Glen Rio ain't all in Texas. Half of it's in hell, and something down there is lonely. Becton wasn't much even before the dust came. Just a lonely splatter of clapboard houses, a red brick schoolhouse, and a windmill that squealed like a hog being skinned. Dry land, flat as paper, with wind that never stopped scratching at the window panes. But in April 1935, Black Sunday, they say Becton disappeared. Not in the poetic sense. Not just, oh, it dwindled down to nothing. No, I mean it vanished. The storm rolled in from the northwest, carried on a wind so dry it peeled the skin from your lips. The sky went from blue to brown to pitch in seconds, and the sound, it wasn't thunder. It was a low growl, like something breathing. Folks had seen dust storms before, but this one was different. It didn't just block the sun, it swallowed. It pushed against doors, seeped through keyholes. People stuffed rags in the cracks, wet towels under the frames. Didn't help. The dust came anyway. Inside the schoolhouse, Miss Clara Bell was mid-lesson, teaching long division to 23 kids ages 7 to 13. The older ones were already eyeing the storm out the windows, nervous. Dust devils danced in the distance, closer than they should have been. When the darkness hit, it was like a wave smacking into a brick wall. Windows shattered inward. A few kids screamed. Others just choked, grabbed their throats. The dust didn't just fill the room. It crawled. It curled along the floor like snakes, slithered up the walls, coiled around necks and wrists and ankles. Miss Bell tried to open the door, but the handle burned her hand and something on the other side pushed back. She shouted prayers, maybe. Screamed. The wind drowned it out. And outside, Becton disappeared. No lights, no signs. Just dust, roaring, like a stampede. For 3 days, the storm sat on the land like a burial shroud. Planes couldn't fly over, trains rerouted, no one went near. And when it finally cleared, the sky turned that eerie color that happens after a tornado passes. Still too blue, like the world's holding its breath. The town was still there. Sort of. Houses half collapsed, windows gone, doors hanging off hinges. The windmill was flat, buried in a dune. But no people. Not a single body, no blood. Just silence and the dust, which never settled. And the schoolhouse? That's the part that stuck. It stood, untouched. Not a broken window, not a splintered board. But the bell never rang again, and no one would go inside. Not even the government men who showed up weeks later, wearing masks and speaking in low voices, asking the locals what they'd seen, because the coughing never stopped. People swear by it. If you stand close, real close, you can hear it. A dry, hacking cough, like someone with lungs full of dirt. Little ones too. Children. Some nights you can hear the shuffling of small feet, the scrape of a chalk stub against a blackboard. The front door is still locked, but the dust seeps through the cracks. It doesn't pile up like normal sand. It flows, like it's alive. If you bring a camera inside, it jams. If you try to light a candle, the flame snuffs out. One time in '78, a bunch of college kids from Lubbock tried to spend the night inside on a dare. They dragged in sleeping bags, beer, a boombox, and some idiot even brought a Ouija board. By morning, their van was still parked outside, engines still warm, but the inside of the schoolhouse? Empty, except for the names written in the dust on the floor. 4 names, and the word "stay" etched underneath in what looked an awful lot like blood. Nobody's found those kids. The locals have a saying now: when the dust won't settle, don't stay too long. And Becton still sits there, half buried, half forgotten. The dust never stops blowing. It gets in your eyes first, then your throat. And if you breathe deep enough, long enough, you'll hear the lesson begin again. Miss Bell taking roll call, the sound of coughing children, and the voice that whispers from beneath the floorboards. Class isn't dismissed yet. But if you're smart, you won't listen. You'll walk away fast. You'll wipe your eyes and keep walking, even if it feels like something's following just behind you, whispering your name in a dry rasp, because the storm never left Becton, and neither did the class. They called it the toughest town in Texas, and back in the 1800s, Helena wore that title like a badge of honor, meaner than a rattlesnake and twice as deadly. Men killed each other over poker hands, women carried knives in their boots, and even the preacher was rumored to have shot a man once for whispering in church. It was the kind of place that smelled like whiskey, gunpowder, and unmarked graves. But what Helena was best known for, what folks whispered about in the dark when the wind scratched against the windows, was the hanging tree. It still stands, today, gnarled and black and mean-looking like something out of a child's nightmare. Locals don't go near it. Not anymore. Not since the last time it bled. Yeah, I said bled. They strung up dozens there. Outlaws, drifters, even a few innocent men who just looked too much like the wrong kind of trouble. The town called it justice. Fast justice. Helena didn't wait for judges. All you needed was a rope, a crowd, and someone to kick the barrel, and the tree. The tree always took them. It was an old oak, older than the town itself, standing crooked in the middle of what used to be the courthouse yard. Now it looms behind a rusted fence on the edge of what's left of town, surrounded by scorched grass that never grows right. The bark is dark, but not with rot. No, it's something else. Something that seeps from the inside. People say the tree screams sometimes, especially during storms. Not loud, more like the groan of a man who knows what's coming. You hear it if you listen too long, standing close when the wind shifts just right. And sometimes if you get real close, you'll see the sap that oozes from the trunk. But it's not sap. It's too red, too thick. Smells like copper and old pennies. I first heard about the tree from my grandfather. He was from Helena, one of the few who ever admitted it. He told me stories when I was little, when I'd stay over at his house in Beeville during the summer. Stories about a man they hung who didn't die right. He twitched for a long time, kicking and choking, his eyes bulging like they were trying to pop free. But he didn't make a sound. Just stared down at the crowd, lips moving like he was whispering something. After that, things started going wrong in Helena. Livestock got sick, wells turned black, children stopped being born, the town got quieter, colder. They say that was when the tree changed. People started seeing things, shadows that didn't belong. Whispers under the roots at night. And blood, always blood, dripping from the lowest branch, the same one they hung the man from. My grandfather said it bled for 3 nights straight, and nobody had the guts to touch it, not even the undertaker, and he'd seen more dead folks than God. Eventually, Helena dried up. Folks moved out. Some say it was the railroads, others say it was the ghosts, but I think it was the tree. I went there once, years after my grandfather died, out of curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe something worse. Helena isn't on most maps anymore. You have to look real close, squint at the faded roads between Carnes City and Nixon. The town is barely standing now, just a few broken buildings, old stone ruins, a church with no roof, and the tree. I found it just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows that stretched like claws. The ground around it was bare and cracked, as if the land itself refused to get close. The fence was broken in 3 places, rusted through. Stepped inside. The air was thick, still, heavy with silence. The kind that presses against your skin like wet wool. I stood at the base of the tree and looked up at the branch. The noose was still there, swaying gently. There was no wind, and then I saw it. A single drop. Slow. Thick. Red. It fell from the bark and landed on my shirt just above the heart. I stood, frozen, unable to move. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, I could swear I felt something watching me. Something old, something angry, something buried deep in the roots, waiting. The ground beneath me pulsed, just once, like a heartbeat. I backed away, fast, nearly tripped over my own boots. I didn't look back until I was back at the car, and even then I only saw the tree. Still swaying, still bleeding. I never went back, but I dream about it. About the man who didn't die right. About the rope. About the whispering under the dirt. And sometimes I wake up with blood on my shirt. Just one drop. Always in the same spot. Right above the heart, Helena still keeps it secret. And the hanging tree still bleeds. Medicine Mound isn't much more than a sigh in the panhandle wind. 3 bald hills rising out of the dry earth like kneecaps on an old god buried too shallow, too long. No stoplights, no stores. Just brittle grass, red dirt, and the bones of what used to be a town. There's a single bench nailed to what's left of a feed store's porch, and if you sit there long enough, the silence starts to feel like it's watching you. The mounds themselves are old, older than Comanche memory, older than Spanish maps. The locals say they've always been there, and they've always been wrong. Not just eerie or strange, wrong. Like they don't belong here. Like they were dropped into the landscape by mistake. Even the sky looks crooked when you stand between them, but the stories didn't start with the hills. They started with the shadows. See, in most places, shadows are honest. They show up when the sun's out and disappear when it's gone. They stretch when the light moves and fall still when you do. Not here. In Medicine Mound, the shadows have rules of their own, especially at noon. The first recorded case was in 1934. A school teacher named Bernice Holloway had just moved into a clapboard house near the middle mound. She was the kind who wore crisp skirts and drank her coffee black even in the heat. One summer day, she walked out into her front yard to shake a rug and noticed something strange. Her shadow wasn't touching her feet. It hovered 2 inches away. Floating, like it was watching her from the ground instead of clinging to her like it should. She laughed it off. Maybe the sun was just high and she was seeing things. But that night, every mirror in the house cracked. Not shattered. Cracked. All of them from edge to edge, like something inside had tried to get out. She left a week later. Didn't take anything but her keys and her Bible. The rug was still hanging on the clothesline 6 years later when the house collapsed from termites. They say there are 3 graves hidden in the hills. Not marked, not remembered. The ground doesn't like to be disturbed, and it won't let you bury a body up there. The dirt spits it back out like bad meat. But the 3 that are buried, those went in willingly. Or maybe they were put there by something older than will. One was a preacher. One was a boy with no tongue. And one was a woman named Elsie May, who bled herself dry in a circle of salt and sang lullabies as the wind peeled the skin from her back. No one talks about what she was trying to keep out, or let in. On summer days when the heat swells and the air warps like melting glass, the curse wakes up. That's what the old folks say. The shadows start shifting. Not fast, not dramatic, just wrong. A tree will lean one way, but its shadow leans the other. A man will walk down the road and leave 4 shadows behind him, like he's not walking alone. And at exactly noon, when the sun is at its meanest and every inch of land should be blistered and bright, that's when the shadows start to move, on their own. They slither across the dirt, crawl up walls, creep into houses through cracks in the wood and wrap themselves around sleeping bodies like blankets made of ice and memory. They whisper, they hum, they show you things you buried, things you forgot, things you swore never happened. A couple in the 1970s tried to build a home between the hills. Nice folks. He was a vet, she was a painter. They lasted 3 months. First it was the cat, started hissing at corners, then vanished. Then it was the canvases. Every one of her paintings began to show the same thing. 3 black hills and a man made of shadow standing between them, holding something like a child made of bones. She burned the paintings, he burned the house. They never came back. Mirrors don't survive in Medicine Mound, not during summer. Hang one up and you'll hear it crack around midday. Doesn't matter how thick or new. Doesn't matter if it's glass or silver or steel. The reflections split, like old fruit. Sometimes they show something behind you that isn't really there, at least not yet. Tourists still come sometimes. TikTokers and ghost hunters. They think it's all just desert superstition. They take selfies on the hills, make jokes about shadow people, run their mouths like the place is just another roadside nothing. But if you stick around until noon, if you're stupid or brave or both, you'll see. You'll feel your shadow, tug away from your feet like it's trying to leave you behind. And sometimes it does. One kid, 19, maybe 20, left a voice recording behind. His friends found his truck idling on the edge of the eastern mound, doors open, radio dead, keys still in the ignition, no sign of him, but his phone was in the seat, still recording. He's laughing at first, then breathing heavy, then whispering, then screaming, and finally a voice that didn't belong to him at all. 3 words. Hollow, hungry, final. You were warned. People say the curse of Medicine Mound isn't about the hills or the graves or even the cracked mirrors. It's about what waits beneath in the soil and the dark, something that only wakes up at noon. Something that's always watching, always learning. Something made of shadow. And now, of us. Barkley. Texas isn't on most maps anymore. Blink and you'll miss it, and maybe that's a good thing. Just a crooked stretch of forgotten highway, a water tower with peeling paint, and a couple of busted barns sagging like they're tired of holding secrets. It's the kind of place where dust hangs in the air like it's thinking too hard, and the wind whispers in a voice too low to be understood, but too steady to be ignored. What's left of Barkley sits about 10 miles east of nothing, surrounded by flat, quiet land. No gas stations, no church bells, just fields, endless green and unnaturally perfect. You can see them from the road. The corn stands too tall, too thick. The wheat sways even when the air is dead still. It looks like heaven for a farmer, but if you talk to the right people in the next town over, usually at the edge of a bar after 2 drinks and with the lights low, they'll tell you there's something wrong with that land. Something's been feeding those crops. The farm used to belong to a man named Hollis Murchison. Tall, wide-shouldered, skin like old leather with hands that could snap a hog's neck without flinching. He came from money back east, but left it all behind after something happened to his wife. No one knew what exactly. Some say she died in childbirth. Others whispered that he killed her and buried her under the orchard out back. Hollis never confirmed anything. He just bought the Barkley land cheap and started farming like the devil himself was chasing him. Thing was, the land was dead when he bought it, drought blasted, dry as bone. The locals laughed at him behind his back, said he'd lose everything by winter. But come October, Hollis Murchison's fields were green. Not just green, they were overflowing. Corn taller than a man, tomatoes the size of softballs, cucumbers fat as wine bottles. People started driving in from neighboring towns to buy his produce. Best tasting vegetables you ever had, they'd buy or say, juicy like they were grown in Eden. But if you looked close, really close, you'd see something off. The color was too rich, like it had bled in from a dream. And the smell, it was sweet, sure, but cloying, like rot wearing a mask of sugar. Then came the missing persons. Started small. A hiker who wandered off. A drifter no one bothered to look for. A couple on their way to Galveston whose car was found outside the Barkley town limits with the keys still in the ignition and blood on the dashboard. But the crops kept coming, fuller and richer every year. People stopped asking questions and just bought the vegetables except for me. My brother Danny disappeared in Barkley in 2004. He was 22, hitchhiking his way through central Texas. The last text he sent me said, "Found a weird old town. Stopping for the night. Place called Barkley." Then nothing. I spent months looking, filed reports, talked to sheriffs. But the town didn't want to help. One deputy, a guy named Fletcher, pulled me aside and whispered, "Leave it alone. People who go looking in Barkley don't come back right." I thought he was drunk, or crazy, or both. But the way his hand shook when he said it stuck with me. I couldn't let it go. I drove out to Barkley one night near harvest season. The sky was black and wide and the moon was hiding. As I crested the last hill before the town, I saw the fields glowing faintly in the dark, like they were alive. There were no lights in the houses, no cars on the road, just the crops, thick and wild and whispering. I parked near what used to be the Murchison place. The farmhouse stood crooked at the edge of the field, its windows black and mouth wide open like it had been screaming for a long time. The door wasn't locked. I went inside. The smell hit me first. Damp earth, iron, and something like spoiled meat. The walls were covered in old newspaper clippings pinned and yellowed. Stories about disappearances, accidents, harvest yields. And at the center, a photograph of Hollis Murchison, standing in his field with a smile too wide and eyes too dark. Scribbled across the bottom in red ink was a single word, "Feed." I heard a noise then, rustling low and wet, coming from the basement. I went down. There were bones in the dirt, human bones, some whole, some picked clean, and roots, thick, pulsing roots, twisting through the walls and floor like veins, like the earth itself was breathing through them. And in the center of the room, a pit, a black hole in the ground with a smell so heavy it made my eyes water. I saw my brother's backpack near the edge. I don't remember screaming. I don't even remember leaving. Just the feeling of being watched, followed, like the crops themselves, were leaning toward me. I burned the house down that night, poured gas from the shed and lit a match, watched it catch and roar and turn the whole thing to ash. But the fields? They didn't burn, not even a little. I watched the flames stop at the edge of the corn like something was holding them back, and I swear I heard a sound then, something between a laugh and a groan, rising from the ground itself. I drove away and never went back. Barkley's still there, still growing, still feeding. People don't talk about it anymore, but the vegetables still show up at roadside stands every now and then. Too big, too red, too perfect. And every few years, someone goes missing near there. And the fields keep whispering. They grow in the dark. They grow without sunlight. And they grow fast when they've been fed. The old church on Maple and Vine used to be the pride of Independence, Texas. Whitewashed wood, a steeple that scraped the sky. The bell, cast in 1904, was loud enough to rattle window panes all the way to Briar Hollow. Every Sunday morning, the whole town came drifting in like smoke. Farmers, teachers, kids with clean faces and scuffed knees. They came for the hymns, the coffee cake, and most of all, for Pastor Elijah Rudd. He wasn't just a preacher. He was the preacher. Big-shouldered, deep-voiced, eyes full of that fire the old-timers called God's lightning. You could feel it when he looked at you, like he saw everything you ever did and forgave you for it anyway. And then one Sunday, hot and still, the kind of day where even the flies were too lazy to buzz, Elijah Rudd disappeared right in the solemn middle of a sermon. 1 second he was there, pacing the altar, quoting Isaiah with that rising rhythm of thunder and glory, his hands outstretched like he was holding invisible weights. And the next, he just wasn't. No puff of smoke, no crash of thunder, no scream, just gone. At first, they thought he'd collapsed behind the pulpit, People rushed up. Mrs. Denning fainted. Old man Cray locked his knees and pissed himself. But there was nothing behind the altar but a scorch mark on the wood. A black oval burned into the floorboards the shape of a man kneeling. It smelled like ozone and rot. Sheriff Reddick sealed off the building. For 3 days, the church stood, empty, windows shuttered, the bell silent for the first time in a century. But then the doors creaked open on their own one night, just past midnight, and the lights flicked on. Folks say they saw a figure standing at the pulpit again. Elijah. Rudd had returned, only it wasn't him. His face was the same. His voice sounded close enough if you didn't listen too hard. But his eyes, Lord have mercy, his eyes weren't human. Not anymore. They were black. Not just pupil and iris, but the whole damn eyeball. Shiny and wet like the inside of a drowned man's mouth. And when he preached, it wasn't the Bible he was reading from. It looked like one. Same black leather, same gold trim. But the words were wrong. Twisted. They spoke of fire beneath the earth, of the sky as a mouth with teeth, of God as something older than light, something that did not love, only watched. He called it the gospel of the deep stone. People kept coming at first, out of habit, curiosity, fear. And he preached every Sunday without fail, always at noon sharp, always barefoot, his voice echoing like it didn't come from his throat anymore, but from somewhere underneath the floorboards. Then the accident started, a baby born with no eyes. A crop circle in the soybean field with symbols no one could read. Mrs. Hanley's dog hanging from the church steeple by its leash, all 4 legs gone like they'd been twisted off. People said it was coincidence. Others said it was punishment. A few said it was prophecy, but everyone agreed on one thing: the cross had to go. The one that hung above the altar was iron, heavy, old as the town itself. A team of 6 men took it down in the dark of night, sweating and cursing as they worked, even though the air was ice cold around it. When it hit the ground, it rang like a bell, then cracked clean down the middle, like something inside it had finally broken free. After that, the sermon stopped mentioning Jesus, or love, or mercy. They were about returning, not to heaven, but to the place beneath the veil. They were about the watchers who never sleep and the mouth that eats time. They were about him. The building changed, too. The paint peeled, but only on the inside. The wood warped in strange ways, like it was twisting toward something in the center. Mirrors wouldn't reflect inside the sanctuary anymore. And the bell, if you rang it by accident or on purpose, always chimed 13 times, even if you only pulled the rope once. One night, the sheriff tried to arrest Elijah, if that's what he still was. Sheriff Reddick stormed the church with 3 deputies, all armed. Only 2 came back, 1 blind, the other mute. Reddick's badge was found days later, melted into the altar like a coin pressed into hot wax. People started leaving after that. Whole families packed up overnight. The town population dropped from 823 to 211 in less than a year. The school closed. The diner stayed open, but no one talked while eating. And the church? The church stayed. Lights on every night, even when the power grid failed. No one goes inside anymore. But they hear things. Voices, chanting, sometimes screams, sometimes laughter that doesn't sound quite human. Last summer, a girl named Ellie Sue dared her friends to touch the blackened spot on the altar floor. She didn't even make it through the front doors. Something cracked the church window from inside and left a smear that looked an awful lot like a handprint, a hand with 6 fingers. Her parents moved away the next day, left their car behind, didn't even lock the door. Now the church just waits, quiet, hungry. They say Elijah Rudd still walks its halls, that what came back wearing his skin isn't done preaching, that one day when the sky turns the color of blood and the sun casts no shadows, the gospel of the deep stone will be read aloud to the world, and when that happens, the cross won't be missing anymore. It'll just be upside down. They called it utopia, like they were daring God to notice. a patch of Texas hill country tucked between cedar-choked ridges and sun-bleached limestone, far enough off the main roads that you'd never find it unless you were looking. Or unless it was looking for you. Now it's just a ghost. Dry boards, broken windows, and a sign nailed to a dead post that reads, "Welcome to Utopia," in faded, peeling red. Someone had crossed out the name in spray paint and scrawled "Wrong Place" underneath in angry black. No one lives there anymore. No one normal, anyway. But people still go. They don't mean to. They just end up there. Campers, hikers, the kind of folks who think GPS will save them in the middle of nowhere. They bed down near the ruins for a night, maybe two, and then the dreams start. Always the same. The well. It used to be in the center of town back when Utopia had a church, a schoolhouse, and a general store that sold glass bottles of pop and homemade licorice. Before the fires, before the drought, before the children stopped waking up. Locals back then used to talk about how Utopia was too perfect. No crime, no sickness, no bad weather. Crops grew tall even in dry years. Babies were born without a single complication. And the water, oh, the water, cold and clear and endless. They said the well never ran dry, not once, not even in the hottest August. But then folks started hearing whispers from it, just soft at first, like your name, carried on the wind. Then came the dreams. They were quiet about it at first. Who wants to admit they dreamt about drowning when the town was full of life? But it wasn't water they drowned in. Not exactly. They'd wake up choking, coughing dust. One boy, 10 years old, name was Micah Rook, clawed his own throat raw in his sleep, said he could feel the dry dirt sliding into his lungs, feel hands pulling him down. He stopped sleeping after that, just sat on the porch all night, staring at the well like it owed him an apology. They found him at the bottom of it a week later. No one knew how he got past the cover. It was heavy, thick wood, bolted shut with rusted chains. Yet it was wide open that morning, and the water, there wasn't any. Just 30 feet of bone-dry stone, and a child at the bottom with his eyes wide open and his mouth full of soil. After that, the town changed. People left in quiet waves. Some packed their things. Others just vanished. Utopia rotted fast. The buildings collapsed. The well was filled in with gravel and concrete, but it didn't help. Nothing helped, because the dreams don't come from the water. They come from underneath. I know what you're thinking. Just stories, campfire crap, right? Except I've been there, camped just off the old road like a fool. It was supposed to be a quick overnight on my way to Bandera. I'd heard the stories, but you know how it goes. Curiosity, a couple beers, sky full of stars. What's the worst that could happen? I fell asleep in the back of my truck with the windows cracked. It must have been around midnight when it started. Was standing at the edge of a dry well, wind howling above me, sky black as a closed eye. And something down there was calling my name, not shouting, whispering, gentle, like a mother rocking a baby to sleep. And then I was falling. The walls were close, like the well wanted to hug me all the way down. I didn't hit bottom. I just kept sinking, slow, air thick with dust. And the deeper I went, the more faces I saw, pressed into the stone, staring, crying, mouthing words I couldn't hear, but I felt them. "We're still dreaming," they said. "Don't wake up." I woke up in the cab with bloody fingernails and dirt in my mouth. Real dirt, packed under my tongue like someone had tried to shut me up while I slept. I left that place so fast I left my cooler and half my gear behind. Didn't even care, that was 3 years ago. And I still dream. Not every night. Just often enough to keep me tired. The well shows up when it wants to. Sometimes it waits until I'm just starting to feel normal again. And then boom. There I am, standing at the edge again, staring down into the dark, and I hear them. The ones still trapped, still asleep. You see, that's the trick. You don't die in Utopia. You sleep. You dream. And eventually the dream dreams you back. People who get too close report waking up gasping, coughing, with lungs full of dust and gravel in their teeth. A few go missing entirely, even now. The rangers chalk it up to coyotes or dehydration. But I know better. The well never needed water. It feeds on something else. Thoughts, memories, names. Once you dream of utopia, it never forgets you. And if you dream long enough, you won't remember what's real anymore. You'll think the well is home. You'll crawl down it willingly, smiling. That's what happened to the people who stayed. They didn't die. They just laid down and let the town sleep through them. If you ever find yourself near utopia, do yourself a favor. Don't stop. Don't rest. Don't close your eyes. Because the town doesn't need to exist to find you. It just needs to dream. There used to be a town called Bantam, nestled in a dusty stretch of Texas where the grass grew brittle and the wind never seemed to stop blowing. Just one long main road, a diner that fried everything in bacon grease, and a water tower that leaned like a drunk uncle on a Sunday. Most of the buildings are gone now, burned, caved in, or swallowed by weeds, but one thing still stands out there on the edge of nothing: the old radio tower. It's rusted now, crooked and tired, like it should have fallen over years ago. No wires, no power running to it. The broadcast license was pulled back in 1972 when the last DJ went missing. And still, it hums. You can hear it if you stand near the base. Not loud, not right away, just a whisper under the wind. A hiss, like old static, crawling up your spine. Locals say the signal's dead. Science says it's impossible. But some nights when the sky is heavy and the moon's hiding, you can flip on a radio, any radio, and find it again. It's always the same spot on the dial, 106.6 FM. They call it the Bantam broadcast. It doesn't matter where you are. Car stereo, transistor, shortwave, even digital ones that shouldn't pick it up at all. Once you tune in, it stays. You can twist the dial all you want, pull the batteries, even smash the damn thing with a hammer, and it keeps playing. Static mostly. But sometimes, voices. They come in bursts. Male, female, young, old. Some are sobbing, some are laughing, but not like it's funny. Like they forgot what words mean and laughter is the only sound left. And some are screaming, raw and high and constant, like the station is piping hell itself straight into your living room. People used to think it was a prank. Back in the 80s, a group of kids from Lubbock drove out to Bantam with gear, scanners, recorders, a guy who said he could track signal frequencies like a bloodhound. They pitched tents near the tower and started recording at sunset. By sunrise, 2 of them were missing. The guy with the scanner had clawed his own eyes out, said the signal showed him something that walks inside lightning. The rest wouldn't talk at all. One girl, Chelsea Downs, was found 2 weeks later on the shoulder of Route 287, barefoot and bloody, whispering into a dead Walkman. She died before she said anything else. The tower was never supposed to be built there. The town council fought it in '49 when WBAN applied for the permit, but the FCC approved it anyway, said there was room in the frequency range, said the location was ideal, said nothing at all when Pastor Glenn Stratton claimed the spot had once been an Indian burial ground, or when old Doc Heffley swore he'd seen lightning strike the dirt there 6 times in a row on a cloudless day. The first DJ was a man named Mark Finley. Folks remember him as quiet, polite, wore suspenders even when it was 102 degrees out. He ran the booth alone, spun gospel and swing music, read birthday announcements and farm reports. One Tuesday in July, he started the morning show like usual. Then at 7:16 a.m. he stopped talking, just went silent on the air. 3 minutes later he spoke again, but it wasn't him. The voice that came through was slow, dry, too deep. It said one word: listen. Then the screaming began. Mark was never seen again. They found his headphones still warm. The mic was broken, twisted like it had been crushed by a fist the size of a bear's. The tape logs from that morning were blank. Not silent, blank. Like they'd been erased before they were recorded. That's when they shut the station down. Or tried to. They cut the power, tore out the consoles. The building burned to the foundation a week later with no sign of a break-in. Nothing left but scorched earth and a smell no one could describe, except to say it didn't belong in this world. But the signal didn't stop. People in town started hearing it on baby monitors, old TVs, even a damn jukebox in the back of Miss Ruby's diner. Always 106.6. Always when the wind shifted east. One man, Jonas Bell, a mechanic, claimed it saved his life. Said he was about to drive off the overpass at Cotton Creek when the radio kicked on by itself and screamed his name. Loud, like his dead mother used to say it. He swerved, crashed into a ditch, broke 3 ribs, but lived. Said he owed the voice everything. Said it was watching over him. 3 weeks later, he shot his wife in the face with a nail gun and slit his own throat. The radio was still on when the police arrived, playing what sounded like children chanting in reverse. Nobody lives in Bantam anymore, not full time, but every now and then someone new hears the signal. They pull off the highway, curious. They walk up to the tower and stand there, heads tilted like dogs hearing a whistle only they can understand. Some come back talking about it, some come back wrong, and some don't come back at all. The last message ever officially logged from 106.6 came in 1993, caught by a ham operator in New Mexico. He transcribed it before his equipment melted. It was a woman's voice, calm, quiet, crying. She said, "It's not static, it's teeth." And the worst part is, she wasn't lying. Claremont used to be a good place, dry, flat, and stubborn, like the people who lived there, but good in the ways that matter. You could leave your doors unlocked. Folks said ma'am and sir, and waved from their porches even if they didn't like you. It had a courthouse made of red brick, a general store that smelled like tobacco and old apples, and a sheriff that people trusted with their lives. His name was Sheriff Elijah Cotter, and he died in 1892. Only problem is, he never really left. You hear stories like this all the time in small-town Texas. Ghosts of gunfighters, haunted saloons, crying women in white. But Claremont's different. It's not just a story whispered over whiskey or trotted out for tourists. No, sir. In Claremont, the ghost isn't just a tale, it's a schedule. Every Friday night, just after sundown, someone sees him. Doesn't matter the season. Doesn't matter the weather. Always on Friday. Always with that same old lantern, swinging slow from one hand, his other resting on the butt of a pistol that hasn't been fired in over 100 years. People say the flame inside his lantern doesn't flicker like a normal one. It pulses slow and blue like it's breathing. And when the wind howls, it doesn't touch him. Not his coat, not his hat, not the dust at his boots. They say if you look too long, you'll hear his spurs, even if he's far off. Even if you're in your truck, windows up, engine running, you'll hear them. Metal on stone, slow, steady, like he's walking through your soul instead of across the gravel. I didn't believe any of it until I went there myself. It was the fall of 2011. I was driving west, heading for Lubbock to see my sister. Thought I'd take the scenic route, avoid the highways. You know how it is. Too many people, too many signs, too much noise. I stopped in Claremont to stretch my legs, maybe take a picture of the old courthouse, the one I'd read about in a brochure in a gas station outside Jayton. The sun was dipping low, painting everything orange and gold. The town looked beautiful in that kind of light. Almost holy. It was empty, though. Not a soul in sight. I walked around a bit, peered into the windows of the old jailhouse where the cells still stood rusted and silent. Walked past the church with its door swinging gently in the breeze. Everything looked preserved. Not clean, not new, but untouched in a way that felt wrong. Like the whole place had frozen sometime in the past and just stayed that way waiting. That's when I saw him. He came around the corner of the courthouse like he'd always been there. Like I was the intruder and not the other way around. Tall, lean with a gray duster that brushed his boots as he walked. His hat was wide-brimmed, shadowing most of his face, but I could see the glint of something behind the brim. Eyes that glowed faintly, like coals left in a fire that refused to die. He didn't look at me. Just kept walking, swinging that lantern low, the blue light dancing on the cracked sidewalk. I couldn't move. It wasn't fear, not exactly. It was more like reverence, like watching a storm crawl over the plains or hearing a hymn in a language you don't speak but still understand. I don't know how long I stood there, but by the time I came back to myself, he was gone. Not vanished, just gone, like he'd never been there. Only the scent of kerosene lingered, sharp and strange in the dry air. I left without taking any pictures. After that night, I started digging. Found an old record that said Sheriff Cotter was gunned down outside the saloon on October 7th, 1892, Friday night. He'd caught a drifter beating his wife and tried to stop it. The man shot him in the chest. Cotter bled out on the main street staring up at the stars. The town buried him with full honors, even carved the words, "He never quit," into his tombstone. But the killings didn't stop. A week later, the drifter turned up dead, his head caved in, his body found outside the courthouse steps. No weapon was found, no footprints in the dirt, just the sound of spurs people claimed they heard around midnight. The town tried to move on, tried to forget, but every Friday, someone saw the sheriff again, always walking, always carrying that lantern. No one knows why he walks. Maybe he's guarding the town he couldn't protect. Maybe he's looking for something or someone that slipped through justice. Or maybe he's just doing what he always did, patrolling. A local once told me, "He won't hurt you, long as you ain't done nothing wrong." And I wanted to believe that. I really did. But last year, a guy named Jared Moss disappeared near Claremont. He was wanted in 3 counties: domestic abuse, armed robbery, and something darker that didn't make the papers. His car was found outside the old jailhouse, keys in the ignition, no blood, no struggle. Just one thing left behind, a smoldering blue lantern sitting on the courthouse steps, still warm when they found it. Sheriff Cotter's been dead for over a century, but he still patrols every Friday night. So if you're ever out near Claremont, and you hear the soft jingle of spurs or catch a flicker of blue light on the wind, don't run, don't hide. And for God's sake, don't lie, because the sheriff's still watching, and he never, ever quit. There's not much left of Silver, Texas, except a few sun-bleached gravestones half a chimney, and the smell of old prayers trapped in the dirt. Blink while driving through and you'll miss it. It used to be a ranching town, and before that, a Catholic mission. A sprawl of adobe walls and candle-lit halls with thick oak beams that creaked like bones shifting in their grave. The mission was called Nuestra Señora del Silencio, Our Lady of Silence. Founded in 1851 by Spanish missionaries, built on land that wasn't theirs, blessed in Latin and cursed in whispers. They said the chapel bell tower was tall enough to see God, but if you listen to the stories, really listen, you'd know they rang those bells more to keep something down than to call something up. It collapsed in 1899, Easter Sunday. No storm, no quake, not a breath of wind. The ground just opened up like a mouth and swallowed the entire place. Mission, tower, monks, and all. Eyewitnesses, what few were left, described the dust cloud as redder than rust and thicker than fire. They said it screamed. No one ever found the bodies or the bells. Now every Easter, the wind goes dead still around midnight. Dogs hide under porches. Clocks stop for 3 full minutes. And if you press your ear to the ground in the center of the old chapel's footprint, just past the fallen arch with packs still carved into it, you'll hear them. The bells. Deep. Dull. Echoing from a place no light reaches. They don't sound right either. Not like church bells. Not pure. The tones warped. Wet. Like something soft is wrapped around the clapper. Some nights, the ringing comes with voices. Not words. Just humming. Low and thick, like monks praying underwater. Old man Petrosky used to say the bells weren't ringing from down there. They were ringing against something trying to crawl out. He was the last of the original families. Lived in a trailer out near Dead Mule Road. Had a map of the town before the collapse tattooed on his back. claimed it changed sometimes while he slept. People thought he was nuts until he shot himself in the head with a shotgun wrapped in rosary beads. He left a note that read, "Don't dig. They're still not done singing." A few tried anyway. College kids, thrill seekers, geologists, every single one of them went in thinking they'd prove something. None of them made it past 20 feet before the soil turned black and started clinging to their tools like it didn't want to let go. In 1987, a professor from Austin dropped a seismic mic into a borehole just south of the chapel ruins. What he got back wasn't earth movement. It was a sound. A slow dragging noise like chains being pulled across stone. He played it for his colleagues. One of them passed out. Another started laughing and wouldn't stop until they sedated him. The professor quit his job, joined a monastery in Nevada, and never spoke again. The town's last mass was held in 1900, 1 year after the collapse. The priest, Father Cullen, read from a Bible that didn't belong to him. When he turned the last page, blood began to leak from the pulpits, and the holy water started to boil. The townspeople took that as a sign. They buried what was left of the mission under 10 feet of salt and burned the church records. All except for one, an unsigned letter kept in the county archives, scrawled in ink that never faded. It read, "The ground remembers what we asked it to forget. The bells will answer when it's time." Today, people avoid silver, but sometimes someone gets curious. Maybe they read about it on a ghost forum. Maybe they hear a whisper on the AM band, something calling them by name in a voice that sounds like a family member who died years ago. They come with shovels or sensors or cameras. They stay one night, maybe two. Then they vanish. And every year, just before Easter, the dust starts to swirl without wind. The dirt hums. And the air smells like candle wax and something coppery, like blood left out in the sun too long. Then right at midnight, the ground starts to breathe, and the bells begin to ring. Not for the living, not for God, but for whatever's still down there, singing, waiting, hungry. They say Fort Phantom Hill got its name from a mirage, something about the way the fort seemed to shimmer above the West Texas plains in the heat, like it didn't want to be part of the earth at all. But anyone who's spent a night near those old stone ruins will tell you the name wasn't about what you could see. It was about what you felt, what you knew, that something was watching you, always, quietly, from behind the old walls or under the ground, or maybe from inside your own bones. They built it in 1851, back when the government was tossing up forts, like barbed wire across the frontier trying to tame something that didn't want taming. The soldiers hated it, said it was cursed. No water, no shade, the wind never stopped, and the fires never lasted more than a few seconds. That's not just talk either. Ask around. You'll hear it. Fire won't burn at Phantom Hill. You can try, if you want. Plenty have. Matches, lighters, blowtorches. Nothing catches. Not for long. You'll see the flame, sure. Feel the heat for a heartbeat or two. Then it'll vanish. Like something sucked the life right out of it. Like the fort doesn't want light. Doesn't allow it. And when the flame dies, when the light's gone, that's when you feel it. That look. That pressure behind your eyes. Like someone just noticed you. Like something old and forgotten just opened its eyes and doesn't want to shut them again. I didn't believe it either. Not at first. I'm not a ghost hunter, I'm not a psychic or a priest, I'm a journalist. Used to be anyway. Back when newspapers meant something and people still read past the headline. I was working a piece on ghost towns of Texas. Thought I'd include Phantom Hill for the color, the name, the ruins, the atmosphere. I figured I'd snap a few pictures, write something poetic about stone and silence, then move on. But Phantom Hill doesn't let you move on so easy. It started when I got out of the car. I parked off FM 600 just north of Abilene and walked toward the remains. Stone chimneys like broken teeth against the dusk. Foundations worn smooth by wind and time. The place felt hollow, but not empty. I set up my camera and tried to light A cigarette. Nothing. My Zippo sparked, flared, then fizzled out like it hit water. I tried again. Same thing. The third time, it didn't even spark. Just sat cold in my hand. I looked around and saw no one. But I swear to you, I felt it. That gaze. It got cold after that. Not desert night cold. This was deeper, heavier. A cold that pressed down from inside your chest. I thought about leaving, but my pride wouldn't let me. Instead, I unpacked my thermos, poured a little whiskey into my coffee, and sat near the central chimney ruins to take notes. That's when I saw the firelight, flickering, not mine, off in the brush. Orange and low, dancing like someone had built a campfire just out of sight. I thought maybe someone else was camping there. Dumb idea, but I wanted to believe it. So I stood up and walked toward it. 20 feet, 40, 60. The light stayed still, never moved, never grew. Then, just as I was almost on top of it, it vanished. Not like someone snuffed it out, more like it folded in on itself, gone without smoke or sound. I turned around, and there was a figure by the fort walls, just a shadow, tall and thin, standing, motionless, watching me. I called out. No answer. Took a step closer. It didn't move. I blinked, and it was gone. I've seen things before. Drug addicts in alleyways, suicidal jumpers on rooftops, bodies under sheets, but nothing chilled me. Like that moment. Like something had judged me and found me lacking. I ran. I didn't pack my things, didn't take my gear. Just sprinted to my car and peeled out of there so fast I almost tore my axle on the dirt road. I didn't stop until I hit a diner 20 miles away, sweating and shaking, barely able to order a coffee. I didn't write the article. Not the way I meant to, and I never went back. But I still dream about it. About the fort. About fire that won't light. About eyes behind the stone burning without flame. Some folks say the fort was cursed from the start, built on land that didn't want it. Native tribes warned the soldiers to leave it alone. Said the ground was bad. Said something lived beneath. It's something older than the Comanche, older than the buffalo, older than the dust itself. Something that hates light, that feeds on it, on warmth, on human curiosity. Others say the soldiers went mad, burned the fort themselves trying to drive out whatever they'd woken. They say the flames reached up to the heavens and then died all at once, as if smothered by a hand the size of the sky. Whatever it is, it's still there, still watching. So if you ever find yourself out past Abilene and the sun's going down and you get a little too close to Phantom Hill, don't light a match. Don't strike a flame. Don't even spark a lighter, because the moment that light dies, it'll see you, and once it sees you, it never forgets. Texan was the kind of town that got built faster than it should have. One minute it was desert, dust and broken rattlesnake bones. Next minute it had saloons, schools, a post office, a bank, and rows of shotgun houses lined up like crooked teeth under the punishing Texas sun, all because of the oil. They struck it in 1923. Black gold, they called it. Sweet Texas tea. The ground belched it up like it couldn't wait to be rid of it. People said you could smell the money in the air. They came from miles around. Roughnecks, drifters, investors with smooth suits and greasy smiles. By 1930, Texan had its own baseball team, a dance hall, and a swimming pool fed by mineral springs that bubbled up near the rig sites. They said the water was good for the skin. They didn't talk much about the way it turned reddish-brown after a hard rain, or how it sometimes steamed in the moonlight like it was boiling from the inside out. Nobody noticed the first scream, just a whisper in the wind during a thunderstorm in May of '31. Folks figured it was the wind slapping metal sheets or coyotes yelping out near the derricks. But the screams kept coming, not every night, just when the storms rolled in heavy, and the thunder sounded like footsteps overhead. They say the oil changed around then too. Still came up thick, still made money, but the smell was wrong. Not the usual stink of sulfur and heat, something else. Something sweet and sour at the same time. like rotting fruit soaked in pennies. Then came the blood. It started at Pump Station 4. A man named Virgil Knotts went down to check a clogged valve. Came up shaking, drenched in crude that wasn't black. It was red. The company said it was rust contamination, claimed the tanks had corroded from the inside. They even released a statement. There is no human biological material present. But that didn't stop people from noticing the bones that came up tangled in the drill bits a week later. Human bones. Small, like they belonged to children. They shut the station down, buried the pipe, poured cement over it like a grave. That was supposed to be the end of it. But Texan didn't forget. The pool closed first. People swore the water whispered if you leaned in too close. The mayor's daughter swam one afternoon in July and came out sobbing blood from her eyes. Said something touched her under the surface. Said it had teeth made of rusted iron. The baseball team disbanded after half the players walked off the field mid-game and just kept walking. Straight into the fields, into the rigs, into the horizon. Never looked back. Never came home. By 1940, Texan was a ghost with a heartbeat, and the storms got worse. You can hear it now if you go. Not many people do, but a few still make the trip. Paranormal thrill seekers, urban explorers, oil men looking for forgotten wells. They don't last long. The screams start around 2 a.m. A woman's voice, sometimes a child's. Sometimes it's in Spanish, sometimes English, sometimes nothing you can name. They rise up with the wind and roll across the empty lots where the town used to be, and if you're standing still enough, it sounds like they're right behind you. And the oil? It still leaks. It bubbles up from cracks in the dry dirt, sometimes from old pipes that were capped and sealed decades ago. But it's not black anymore. Not all of it. Some days it's thick and red like it bled straight from the earth. On those days, the wind dies completely, and the air gets so heavy you can't breathe without tasting copper. In 1972, a geologist named Curtis Berman took a sample of the red crude and brought it to a lab in Austin. He didn't even get to test it. The bottle shattered on its own in the fridge. The room filled with a high-pitched whine. No source, no explanation. 3 of his assistants bled from the ears. Curtis went home that night, locked himself in the garage, and drilled through his own hand with a power bit. Said he was trying to let it out. Nobody asked what it was. Now Texan's just a patch of sunburned ground along Highway 67. No signs. No visitors. Just an old rusted derrick still standing like a broken finger pointing up at nothing. And if the wind is right, if a storm is coming, you'll hear the whine of machinery that hasn't worked in 80 years. You'll smell the oil. And you'll wonder if it's blood, and God help you if it starts raining. Because the rain in Texan doesn't wash anything away. It wakes it up, and then the screaming begins all over again. LaSalle, Texas is just one of those places the highway forgot. You could pass right by it doing 80 on Route 90 and never notice a thing except the shimmer of heat on cracked asphalt and maybe a rusty sign half swallowed by brush that says, LaSalle, founded 1871. That's if it's still standing. There's no gas station, no post office, no real town to speak of anymore. Just a couple of concrete slabs where buildings used to be, a few brick chimneys with nothing to warm, and a field that doesn't seem to grow anything except dust and bad memories. But even though the old LaSalle Hotel is long gone, burned to cinders in 1949, people still hear it, or feel it. Hard to say. That low, steady hum that starts at the base of your neck and works its way into your teeth if you stand too close to the empty lot where the hotel used to sit. Locals say it's been there ever since the fire. Doesn't matter the hour, the weather, the wind, if you stop and listen, you'll hear it. Or if you don't hear it, you'll feel it. The humming, not like electricity or bees or engines. More like a man's voice, held deep in his chest, singing a single note so low it could crack glass, if there were any glass left to break. People describe it differently. An old rancher said it was like a cello being played underwater. A teenage girl said it sounded like a phone vibrating beneath 6 feet of dirt. But everyone agrees on one thing: it never stops. I first came across the story of the LaSalle Hotel in 2007, working on a book about forgotten Texas. Ghost towns, old churches, sunken cemeteries, the usual haunted Americana that fills coffee table books and History Channel specials. The LaSalle story was buried in a local newspaper archive just 3 paragraphs long. Something about a fire that took 22 lives. An overnight blaze. Most of the victims never made it out of their rooms. It mentioned a lullaby sound that survivors claimed they heard just before the smoke rolled in. That's what hooked me. Not the fire, not the body count. That word, lullaby. So I drove out there. It was just me and a borrowed Jeep and a weekend with nowhere else to be. I found the lot after getting lost twice. You wouldn't know anything ever stood there except for a few warped stone steps that led up to absolutely nothing, and a rusted metal plaque bolted to a rock that said, LaSalle Hotel Site, 1893-1949. Someone had spray painted over part of it. The word listen was scrawled in dripping black letters on the back. I laughed. I really did. I thought it was some bored teenager's idea of spooky fun. But then I heard it. Not with my ears. Not at first. It started in my stomach. A vibration, like you feel when you're too close to a big speaker turned way down low. Then it moved into my spine, my molars, the tips of my fingers. That hum. Deep. Rhythmic. Like something old was breathing beneath my feet. I thought maybe it was a trick, maybe an underground generator or a fault line. Maybe it was me expecting something and making it real with my own messed up brain. I walked in circles around the lot. It never changed, never got louder, never got softer. It just was. Constant, insistent. Like it had always been there and always would be. That night I stayed at a motel 20 miles away. I couldn't sleep. My legs wouldn't stop tingling, and I kept waking up with the impression that someone had whispered in my ear. But when I opened my eyes, there was nothing there. Just the faint echo of that hum. I didn't go back the next day. I meant to, but something about it felt wrong, like returning would cross a line I couldn't uncross. Later I found out more. The hotel didn't just burn. It collapsed. The fire started in the basement, in the laundry room, and the flames climbed, faster than the staff could react. Some folks say the sprinklers never went off. Others say they did but sprayed out thick black water that smelled like oil and iron. Every person who survived reported the same thing. That low, soothing sound that filled the halls just before the alarms. One man claimed he saw people walking toward the flames, smiling like they were being called home. The fire marshal couldn't explain it, called it a freak electrical fire and shut the case. But there are older stories. Before it was the LaSalle Hotel, the site was a boarding house. Before that, a church. Before that, a single-room schoolhouse that burned down in 1883 with 11 kids inside. No official records remain, just pieces of rumor. But in every story, the hum was there. A sound that drew people in. A sound that soothed and seduced and softened them before something terrible happened. There's a theory, shared by an old woman I met in a diner outside Seguin, that the hum isn't mechanical or ghostly at all. She said it's the sound of the land remembering. That some places have memories deeper than bone, deeper than history. And when enough pain happens in one spot, enough death, enough heat, the land starts to hum like a scar trying to sing. She told me, that hum's a mouth. A call. One day someone will answer. I haven't gone back to LaSalle, but I still hear it sometimes. Usually in the dead of night when everything's quiet and the lights are off and I can feel my own blood moving through my head. That same note, that same lullaby tone. Maybe I brought it with me. Maybe that's what it wanted all along. If you're ever out that way and decide to stop, don't linger, don't close your eyes, and whatever you do, don't hum back. There's a stretch of Texas land so quiet it makes your teeth ache. No wind through the trees, no chirp of crickets, no rustle of feathers. Just silence so heavy it feels like something pressing down on your shoulders. That stretch is El Dorado. It's Not on most maps anymore. And the ones that do show it mark it with a faint circle and no roads leading in. Locals from surrounding counties whisper about it, but only after a drink or two. And they always start the same way. You ever notice how no birds fly over that place? It's true. You can see it on satellite footage if you dig around enough. Dark, patches of sky where bird flocks veer hard to the left or right, as if hitting an invisible wall. Migrating geese split formation over it. Buzzards avoid it even when something dead's lying in the middle of Main Street. Planes sometimes get static over that airspace. And if you bring a drone out there, good luck. It'll drop out of the sky like it got slapped. Back in the early 1900s, El Dorado was booming. Oil, cattle, cotton, you name it. The town square had one of everything. A bank, a post office, a barber shop, a Baptist church that doubled as a storm shelter. But it was the school that made folks proud. Big brick building with a bell tower and ivy crawling up the sides. It was built right over the original foundation of a Spanish fort. That's important. See, the fort was abandoned under strange circumstances in 1789. All the soldiers gone without a trace, not dead. Just gone. A few rifles, boot prints in the dust, and a chapel with a cracked altar stone. That stone stayed buried under the school. They paved over it. They built desks and chalkboards and little cubbies for children's shoes above it. And that was the beginning of the end. The birds started leaving in '46. Slowly at first. Pigeons stopped roosting in the eaves. Sparrows vanished. Then came the silence. The kind that buzzes in your ears and makes you wonder if you're hearing your own heartbeat too loud. A kid named Benny Waller noticed it first. He asked his mom why he never saw robins anymore. She told him not to talk like that. Then he vanished, disappeared during recess. 1 minute playing jacks, next minute gone. No one saw him leave. No one heard him scream. His cap was found at the edge of the school's garden, and that was it. No footprints, no signs of a struggle, just the silence and the smell of turned earth that wasn't from any gardener's hand. A few years later, the preacher's wife claimed she saw something crawl out of the bell tower one night. Not fly. Crawl. She said it moved like it had too many legs and not enough bones. Said it had a face that didn't stay the same for more than a second. She gouged out her own eyes with a hymnals corner before anyone could ask more questions. The birds never came back. Not even after the school was torn down in '59. Not even after they tried to purify the land with a circle of white crosses and Bible verses painted in motor oil. The ground just soaked it all up like it was thirsty. And the sky stayed empty. People say they sometimes see shadows flicker across the rooftops. Not birds. Too big for birds, too slow. They move like curtains in a breeze that isn't there. And when the clouds roll over El Dorado, they stall, like something's holding them in place from underneath. One man, Carl Denton, ran a pest control business out of the county and took a job fumigating a barn just outside town. He brought his hawk, Roscoe, in the truck like always. Roscoe had been trained to fly and return, proud little beast with golden eyes and a scream that could rattle a fence post. Carl opened the door, let him loose. Roscoe rose, circled once, and made it 20 feet before dropping like a stone. Dead, not from poison, not from trauma, just lifeless. Carl didn't say a word, packed his gear, left the barn half done, and drove until his truck ran out of gas. He wouldn't even speak to his wife for 2 weeks. When he finally did, all he said was, "There's no air in El Dorado, only watching." The post office closed in the '70s. The last barber left in '81. The last child born in El Dorado was in 1994. Her name was Ellie Simmons, and she was stillborn. Born with eyes open and a smile too wide. The coroner said her lungs were filled with dust, not fluid. He quit 2 days later and moved to Maine. Now the town's dead, but it's not empty. They say if you stand in the middle of El Dorado at noon, you can hear your own thoughts start to whisper back at you. Not echo, whisper. Saying things you'd never think on your own, telling you to dig, telling you to stay. Telling you that feathers are lies, that wings are broken things, and flight is for cowards. They say the thing under the old school, and the one that was beneath the Spanish fort, the one beneath the altar stone, isn't dead. It's waiting. And it doesn't like things above it. Doesn't like things flying overhead, free, holy. It wants the sky empty. And it got its wish. So if you're ever driving the back roads west of San Angelo and your GPS cuts out and the sky goes silent and you realize you haven't seen a bird for miles, don't stop. Don't get out. Don't listen to the silence. And for the love of everything good and winged, don't look up. Boomtown, Texas isn't on most maps anymore, and that's probably for the best. The land's dried up, the derricks are all leaning like drunk skeletons, and the only thing that runs through there now is wind and rumor. You can stand on the old platform, nothing around but sun-blasted prairie and the smell of rust, and if you close your eyes you can still hear it. The long, low whistle of a train that shouldn't exist. The tracks are mostly gone now, ripped up and sold for scrap, decades ago, but folks say the train still comes. Always at night, always alone. No passengers, no cargo, just a single car and a conductor in a blue cap who never speaks. And he has no face. It's an old story, sure. Every dying town needs one. Some talk about ghosts, some about witches, some about devils that live in wells or screams in abandoned mines. Boomtown chose a train. But here's the thing. People go missing out there. Still, every few years a kid on a dare or a drifter looking for shelter. They go out to the platform and never come back. And the weirdest part? There's no record of them leaving. Not a single one. It's like the train erases them. I didn't believe any of it. Not at first. I grew up in Abilene, but my mother's sister lived in a trailer near Boomtown, and we'd visit once or twice a year when I was a kid. She told me the story, sure. How the oil dried up, how the railroad company pulled out in '47, and how the conductor still came back to collect lost souls. She said he wore a navy coat with silver buttons and rang a little brass bell right before the train rolled in. Said if you heard it, you had exactly 10 seconds to walk away, or you were going for a ride you'd never come back from. She'd tell me that while slicing peaches, real calm-like, as if she were talking about the weather. She disappeared in 2009. Her trailer was locked from the inside, no signs of struggle. Her shoes were still by the door, the stove was still warm, and there were 2 long, rusted tracks etched into the dirt right behind her property, fresh tracks. The local cops shrugged it off. She wandered off, they said, probably heatstroke or coyotes, but I knew better, so I went back. It was 2013, I was 32, working as a stringer for a travel magazine. I told my editor I was chasing a ghost, town feature, which technically was true. I stayed in a motel outside Sweetwater and drove out to Boomtown just before sunset. The road there is broken and rutted, the kind that rattles your teeth and makes you wonder if maybe this is all a bad idea. The platform was still there, half rotted, half gone, a few warped boards, some old bolts poking up like metal thorns. The air was thick with static. The sky had that sick orange tint that means a storm's coming or something worse. And the silence was heavy, like sound had been sucked out of the world. I sat, waited. Nothing happened. Not at first. Then came the bell. Not loud, just a soft, clear chime like something delicate and far away. It rang 3 times, then silence. And then the wind shifted. The rails, what was left of them, began to hum. Not loud, but steady, like they were remembering something. And out of the dark, down a track that physically didn't exist anymore, came the train. It rolled, in slow, black engine, 1 passenger car, no lights, no sound, just the creak of old iron and the hiss of steam that shouldn't have been possible. I felt like I was watching a film reel from the 1940s, except I could feel the heat of it, smell the coal and grease and time. The conductor stepped out. He was tall, too tall, wore a faded navy uniform and a cap pulled down low. Where his face should have been, nothing. Just smooth skin, stretched tight and pale like wax. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, just emptiness, but I swear to you. He looked at me. I felt it in my gut, that cold attention, like being studied by something that wasn't human anymore. He lifted one gloved hand and pointed to the open door of the train. I didn't move. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been a second, could have been a year. Then he lowered his hand, tipped his head, turned, and stepped back onto the train. The door shut. The bell rang one more time, and the train rolled backward into the dark until it disappeared. No smoke, no dust, nothing. I got in my car and left. I never told my editor what really happened, just filed a piece about the fading bones of old oil towns and the echo of industry. He liked it, called it poetic. But I never forgot what I saw. And I started digging, quietly. Turns out people do vanish in that area, not just once in a while, every few years like clockwork, always in the same month, always around the same date, September 14th. The same day the last real train pulled out of Boomtown in 1947, never to return. Except it did. They never found the conductor from that final run. Said he must have fallen off somewhere between stops. His name was Silas Blackwell, a quiet man. Worked the line for 20 years, didn't have a family. Died alone if he died at all. But here's the thing. His picture's still up in the old Depot Museum in Abilene. Navy coat, silver buttons, bell in hand and no face, just a blur, like the film couldn't capture him, or wouldn't. So if you ever find yourself west of Sweetwater and you take a wrong turn and you end up on a dirt road with a dead platform and the scent of burnt oil in the air, don't wait around. Don't listen for the bell, because that train still runs, and the conductor is always looking for passengers. Fowlerton, Texas is one of those places where the map lies. You'll find it marked in faded ink somewhere southwest of San Antonio, down a stretch of road so cracked and sun-baked it looks like God forgot to finish it. Just a cluster of collapsing wood frames, broken fences, and old tin signs rattling in the breeze. If you didn't know what you were looking for, you'd never know there was once a town there. But the wind remembers. The wind always remembers in Fowlerton. They say when the land was first carved up for cattle and cotton, the earth didn't take too kindly to it. The settlers were met with failed crops, poisoned wells, and a strange stillness in the trees at night. Not silence, stillness. Like the land was holding its breath, waiting. And when the wind came, it didn't come gentle. It came howling, screaming through the mesquites, carrying something with it. Voices. People who stayed long enough claimed they could hear their names being called after dark, not shouted, whispered. Soft and sweet, like a lover's breath at your ear. The first time you heard it, you were supposed to ignore it. Pretend it was nothing. Pretend you didn't hear your name slipping through the branches in the black. Because if you answered, if you whispered your name back, that was it. The wind remembered you, claimed you, and it didn't stop calling after that. My Uncle Royce was one of those people who thought he could out-stubborn a ghost town. He moved to Fowlerton in '91, bought up a sagging farmhouse with a collapsed barn and 40 acres of nothing. Said he liked the quiet, said it was good air out there, claimed the wind helped him sleep. By '94 he was gone. Not dead, gone. He left everything behind, truck in the yard, keys on the table, dinner still warm in the microwave. The only thing missing was Royce and every photograph of him that had ever been in the house. Pulled right out of the frames like they'd never been taken. I found the house like that when I drove down looking for him. I spent one night there. That was enough. The wind never stopped. It moaned all night through the cracked windows and the chimney flue, but it wasn't the sound that got me. It was the words. It said my name, over and over. Sometimes soft as cotton, sometimes harsh and ragged like a scream buried under sand. But always my name, like the wind had teeth and it was gnawing on it. I didn't answer. I didn't even breathe. Hard. Just waited until the sun rose and I got the hell out. Years later, I went back. Not because I wanted to, but because of the stories. People still go missing in Fowlerton. Not often, not loud. It's quiet vanishing, like fog in the morning. Their names fade from memory, from paper, from records. And that's what gets me, the forgetting. Like the wind takes more than people, like it takes who they were. There's a theory about why the wind carries names. Some say it started when the town's first graveyard was paved over by a developer in 1910. They didn't move the bodies, just the headstones. Built a church on top of it that burned down 2 years later, killing everyone inside. That was the first time people reported hearing names on the wind. After that, it never stopped. As if the dead had to remind the living they were still there, buried under dust and cement. Others say it's older than that the land itself was cursed long before a white man ever set foot on it. There are Comanche legends of a speaking wind that mimicked voices to lure warriors into canyons where they were never seen again. My gut tells me both stories are true in some twisted way, that the land's angry and the wind is its memory. And memory, when it's been buried long enough, comes back sharp. In 2018, a podcaster named Holly Kincaid tried to do a series on Fowlerton. She stayed for 3 nights. On the third, she posted a clip of herself whispering her own name in front of a mesquite tree. You can still find the video online if you dig deep enough. She smiles like it's all a joke. Then she says, Holly, do you hear me? The wind answers, clear as day. Holly. She hasn't been seen since. That's the thing about the wind in Fowlerton. It doesn't take everyone, just the curious, the defiant, the ones who think they're too clever to be caught. And always, it starts the same way. You hear your name, once, maybe twice, and you think it's just the breeze, just my imagination. But if you answer, that's the end of you. They say if you go out there now, all that's left of Fowlerton is a line of rusted fence posts and that one big mesquite near where the old church stood. It hums when the wind comes. Low and strange, like a voice trying to get out of the bark. They say it's full of names now. Carved in, spoken, whispered, remembered. And if you lean in close, if you're real quiet, you'll hear yours too. Don't answer. Klein was the kind of town where things didn't just die, they vanished. It sits quiet now just off the edge of FM 400, way out in the Texas panhandle where the sky stretches forever and the wind sounds like it's remembering something it shouldn't. No one really lives there anymore. A gas station, a church with busted-out windows, a row of gutted houses, and the graveyard. That's what people talk about, the graveyard. You won't find it on any cemetery registry. No iron gate, no name carved in stone. Just a low fence made of cedar posts and rusting barbed wire, sagging under the weight of time. Inside are 31 tombstones. White, gray, a couple black marble ones that don't shine anymore. All of them clean as bones in the sun, but none of them have names. Not one letter, not one date. Just blank faces turned toward the sky like they're waiting for someone to remember who they belong to. Old-timers from the nearby county say it wasn't always like that the stones used to bear names like Corley, Mathers, and Duell. That back in the 1930s, Klein was small but proud, had a cotton gin, a one-room schoolhouse, and a preacher who could make a man weep like a baby just by saying amen. And they say the trouble started when they built the church too close to the cemetery. Too close to something buried deeper than coffins go. See, there was an old well under the far edge of the graveyard, older than the town, dug by hand back when Comanches still rode the plains and settlers were just scattered bones in the dirt. The well was dry before Klein was even named, covered with a slab of stone that was warm to the touch even in winter. The preacher, Pastor Elam, had it blessed. Then he had it ignored, but you can't ignore what doesn't sleep. The first blank stone appeared in 41. Thomas Griggs died of tuberculosis. 1 week after he was buried, the letters on his stone started to fade. Thought it was weather, the sun, maybe vandals. They carved it again. 2 weeks later, blank. They tried painting it, chiseling it deeper, even replacing the stone. Same thing, clean as a slate. By the end of that year, 5 more stones went blank. By 43, people stopped dying in Klein. Not because they lived, because they left. Ran. Packed up their houses and their memories and didn't look back. Those that stayed, too poor or too proud, started saying things like, "The ground remembers better than we do." The thing under the well, It wasn't sleeping anymore. There were whispers of sounds at night, wet, sucking noises beneath the soil, footprints in the graveyard that didn't match anyone living, and every morning, the earth in front of those blank stones would be just slightly disturbed. Not like digging, more like breathing. A dog disappeared, then a boy. They found his shoes beside the well, one sock still inside. Pastor Elam boarded up the church in 1946, left a note nailed to the front door. The dead are walking in the wrong direction. He hung himself in the bell tower that night. The next day, every tombstone went blank. No one's been able to stay inclined longer than a week since then. Power won't hold. Cell phones die. Even compasses spin in slow circles near the graveyard, like they've forgotten which way is north. A film crew tried to document it in 1998. College kids from Austin thought they'd do a Blair Witch-style shoot. They camped out by the stones, set up cameras, spoke to the air like they were daring it to answer. They found the tent 3 days later. Cameras melted. All the footage wiped clean. The only thing left was a field recorder still hissing with static. At the 30-minute mark, someone whispers, "Don't carve the name. It already knows." They say the earth still moves a little every night. Not from wind, not from animals, from below. You can see the dirt shift, slow and steady, like something big rolling just beneath the surface. People have seen stones tilt, just a hair, like whatever's buried underneath is trying to push back. But there are no graves, no markers, just 31 blank stones and that dry well in the corner, still warm to the touch even when the frost comes. No one's buried in Klein anymore, because Klein doesn't bury its dead, it keeps them. And one day, when the earth has moved just enough, something's gonna open that slab again, not with a tremor, not with a quake, with a whisper, and whatever's down there is going to crawl up, dripping dirt and forgotten names, and it's going to remember all of us. In Indianola, Texas, there's a mission that shouldn't still be standing. The walls are cracked and crumbling. The foundation's older than anything in the region has a right to be. And the roof has more holes than a confession booth on a bad day. But the locals don't go near it, not because it's dangerous in the usual way, but because it's alive. They say it breathes, not metaphorically. Not in that poetic, history lives here way that tour guides use when they want to make a pile of stones sound romantic. No, it breathes. You can hear it if you go there after dark. The deep, slow sound of air pushing in through old mortar joints and out again through the cracks around the bell tower, like lungs made of stone. Inhale, exhale, groaning, moaning, whispering, like it's in pain or angry. Nobody knows exactly when the mission of San Francisco de la Espada was first built. Some say 1840s, others push it back to the 1700s. There are even whispers that it was built on top of something older, something not built by missionaries at all, but by people who lived in the earth and worshipped things with too many eyes and no faces. But those are just stories, right? Campfire fuel, tourist bait, except the walls really do move. The first time I saw it, I was 17. My older cousin Jay dared me to go inside after sunset, said the mission was full of ghosts and bad breath. I thought he was full of crap. I was young, cocky, full of beer and bravado, and still stupid enough to believe that old buildings couldn't hurt you. I hopped the rusted fence and stepped through the archway just after dusk, and I felt it almost immediately. That pull in the air, like stepping into a room where something had just stopped breathing. Cold, but not just cold. Wrong. The inside smelled like old blood and wet stone, like something had died there and refused to rot properly. Dust clung to everything. The altar was nothing but splintered wood and candle wax long hardened into rivers. But it was the walls that got me. They were moving. Just a little at first. Barely noticeable. Like a shudder. You catch from the corner of your eye. Then a slow push outward. Breathe in. And back in. Breathe out. You could hear the creak of the stones like ribs under pressure, and there was a sound behind that sound, something wet, something alive. I turned to leave, but the doorway had narrowed. Not by a lot, but enough to notice. Like the building, had exhaled just a little too far and was taking its time drawing back in. I didn't scream, not yet. Not until the whispering started. It wasn't in English. Or Spanish. It wasn't even language really, just a low murmur like a congregation humming something older than hymns. Something before God. I ran. Jay was laughing when I got back over the fence, but he stopped when he saw my face. He never brought the mission up again. Neither did I. I moved away a few years later, left Texas behind for colder places and cleaner memories. But Tejanos always stuck with me like something sharp in the back of my brain. And in 2015, I went back. Call it nostalgia. Call it stupidity. Call it whatever you want. I told myself it was for a book I was writing on forgotten missions of the Southwest. But deep down I just wanted to see if the damn thing still breathed. It did. Only now, it sounded different. Deeper. Slower. Hungrier. I didn't go inside that time. Just stood outside the cracked arch and listened. It wasn't whispering anymore. It was chanting. Locals don't talk about it, but if you get someone drunk enough, they'll tell you about the missing kids from the 1980s. 4 of them, all last seen near the mission. They say you can still hear them crying from the choir loft, but nobody's been brave enough to check. The priest who used to take care of the place hanged himself in the bell tower in '93. They found pages from his journal tucked into his robes, most of it gibberish, but one line stuck with me. It won't stop breathing, it never sleeps, it remembers the blood. The bishopric quietly distanced itself. No more funding, no more tours. The mission was left to rot, but it never collapsed. Like the walls were held up by something stronger than mortar and faith. Like it didn't want to fall. Like it couldn't. Visited one last time in 2020 during the pandemic. Place was quieter than ever. The sky was gray. The road cracked with weeds. The mission was exactly as I remembered it, only swollen. Like it had inhaled and just hadn't let the breath go. You could feel the pressure in the air, like standing inside a lung. The stones bulged outward ever so slightly, and the bell in the tower swung even though there was no wind, I swear to you, no wind, and the whisper came again. Not in my ear this time, in my head. It said my name, not yelled, not even spoken, just known. Like the building remembered me. I didn't stay. I don't think anyone should, because the mission in Tejanos is alive. It breathes. It waits. And it is full of something ancient and angry, something that was never human, never holy, and never meant to be walled up. If you hear it breathe, don't go inside. If you hear it say your name, it's already too late.